Hello, hello, hello. If you can see us, if you can hear us, please do let us know, because it's Sunday, which means it's time for more Lorebeards.
It does indeed. And you may notice that at the moment we've got that old fantasy battle Lorebeards title at the top. We're about to change it because we are about to head into an entirely new realm of discussion, an entirely new realm of gameplay, because we are, of course, going into our very first ever Age of Sigmar Lorebeards. But it's nice to have a transition point, that moment where you move from the old into the new. This is something that we've been planning to do for quite some time, and I'm kind of delighted and also slightly trepidatious about, because it's an era of gameplay that I don't personally have any direct involvement with. So it's something where I am going to be taking a very different stance to what we do with our normal Lorebeards episodes. But more about that as we dive into the episode.
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty fun one. Obviously, one of the things that's very, very notable about Age of Sigmar is that it's a completely new setting while also simultaneously not being entirely new, which is why instead of doing the thing that we did with 40K, where we went and found specific people to be completely new hosts and all this stuff, it's well, we'll just do it, because it's not really so much a completely brand new setting as it is the setting that we all know and love evolving into a different form, which does have its interesting own little tidbits and stories to it, because a lot of what Age of Sigmar does, which today's episode will feature really heavily on, is that in order to tell the new stories, they often end up adding to or adjusting things from the old stories so that the new stories will make sense. And today's character, good old Morathi, is a very, very good example of that, which is why I was so keen on her being kind of our first step into this setting.
Yeah, and now that I've read up and everything, I am enormously delighted we're dealing with Morathi first, because for me, she stands as a perfect example for any of you out there who don't really know much about Age of Sigmar, do know a bit about Warhammer as a whole, and want to know what the heck is going on with this Age of Sigmar business, because she, in many respects, stands as a metaphor for everything that Age of Sigmar does as it moves into its new setting. I'll dive into that a bit when we move into the intro for this one. I'm actually pretty excited for exactly how this one's going to land. As I noted, though, that this is, as a stream, going to have to be a bit different to our other ones, because normally we both sit here and we take our own individual takes on whatever comes in, because that's how we do it. We know all the lore and we're discussing it out. I have a slightly different angle from, for example, Ryan. Ryan is often taking it from the consumer's perspective. I'm often taking it from both a consumer and a creator's perspective. This time it's going to be much more of a, Ryan is the one who's been steeped in this right from the beginning, reading each thing as it comes out, where I am much more of a skeptical person viewing in from the outside, making commentary from more of that angle than the other one. So I think this one should be a really fascinating take on both what Age of Sigmar has become, what it first was, and also what does it offer to someone like me who genuinely has no interest in it at all. And I think this is something to make quite clear from the outset. This is a rare stream for us, because we're not both coming in as relatively rabid fanboys with foam going out of our mouth as we're exceedingly excited to discuss whatever it is. For me, this one is much more of a, okay, can you win me over? Is this going to be the one that does it? And by the end of the stream, you'll almost certainly have an answer as to whether I am very critical about what it's done or whether I'm very supportive, or alternatively even vacillates somewhere between the middle, where I go, this bit was really good, this bit a little bit less so. And I think this is going to be a super fun stream for that one. So if you're not someone that likes Age of Sigmar or has had any involvement with it at all, I would argue this is probably the stream for you, because Morathi makes a great character to bridge that divide, because she does bridge it beautifully. But she's also a good card to discuss for what Age of Sigmar is doing, because she sort of goes through the whole process herself during the course of her story. And it gives you an opportunity to see what Age of Sigmar does, what it represents, and whether you think it's a cool new take, and whether you'd like to go and take a little bit more time to read up on its background.
Yep. This will also be one of the rare times where I think probably closer to the end of the stream, I'm going to give anyone and everyone who is curious and still listening at that point wants to know more. I'll kind of give you the reading list that was used to inform this stream, because this isn't kind of like LAWhammer, where when me and Andy discuss LAWhammer, it's a lot of like discussing books that sort of float in the ether, and if you have to know where to find them if you don't already own them, or you're going to be hunting down in like old bookshops or on eBay and all this other stuff. Whereas the nice thing about Age of Sigmar is all the books we're going to be dealing with today, with some very minor exceptions, are all very, very easy to get your hands on right now, which is great and awesome. If it's a setting that you're going, oh, I would like to know more, that is something that is easier to do without having to go on ridiculous journeys that, if you're not used to hunting for rare books, can be very stressful and not worth the effort.
Yeah, totally. And this is the reading list that I used when I made my way through my Age of Sigmar journey. And might I say a couple of other things to add to that? Normally, when I come to one of these streams, I come from a pretty informed perspective. I've done a lot of reading, both from the perspective of someone who's been writing for, reading, resolving bits for it for like the last 4 or 5 decades, but also I like to brush my skills up just before any particular stream, just to make sure I've not forgotten anything. And every time I'm generally happy to know I've remembered most stuff. This one is a completely different situation. I'm reading it for the first time, which means I've already forgotten the vast majority of the names involved, meaning I will have to go, oh, wait, which one was that? Because Warhammer, as Warhammer loves to do, throws lots of made up words all over the place. And in this particular case, it's a surprising number of new words that are dropped in to discuss often things that we kind of know, or worse, old words repurposed in new ways that just makes you go, oh, wait a minute, I'm a little bit confused now.
Oh, boy.
What the heck is happening? And on a single read through, that means I don't pick up all of the complexities of this. So be aware, I might use a couple of the terms wrong as we go, and that's okay. We're going to be fumbling through this. Ryan, however, knows them much better, and he's there to hopefully correct, amend, and resolve all the issues that I might have. Let me also say that there's another big gaping hole here from my perspective that I think is worth discussing right from the beginning. And that's that I have a big gaping hole in all the rest of the Age of Sigmar lore, meaning that I don't have context here. I don't have the context of all the other books and what they provide and potentially support for the story of Morathi. So I can't sit here and discuss the greater, finer details of one big event that happens off screen in the tale of Morathi and then influences her actions in the next step of her story. So that's where we have to lean a little bit more heavily on Ryan to say, oh yeah, and then Nagash did that Necroquake thing. Ha 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 ha! Okay, I've not read up on that. It means F all to me. But over the course of our Age of Sigmar, let's say streams, because we're going to do more than this, I will slowly but surely patch up my lore. And as is always the case with Lorebeards, we will be deeply both critical and supportive of the bad and the good. We are not fanboys in that we think everything that's created is perfect. What we are is great lovers of the setting. And that sometimes means that when something's added that we go, that's a bit daft, we just happily call it out as a bit daft. But what we do in Lorebeards that you tend not to find anywhere else is we also try to say, but can we make this thing that looks daft be cool? Can we make it actually work without having to change anything? And it's one of the things that makes Lorebeards, I think, a little bit more interesting, is that we try to take the existing lore, even when it's ridiculous, and make it work. It's a little bit like how the Star Wars prequels were rubbish. You might love them. Apologies if you do. But they're rubbish. But then they came along afterwards, they added the Clone Wars, lots of other stories, and they almost make the prequels good. They don't say the prequels got anything wrong, because perish the thought that anything could be wrong in those movies. What they do instead is they say, see all those things that happened that look really stupid and came out of nowhere? Here's a whole host of extra lore to explain why it occurs and why it's cool. And in some respects, we like to look at lore that doesn't make sense and try to make sense of it. So I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going to double check that our Age of Sigmar screen works, because we have to bring it up at some point. It doesn't quite. It's a bit low. So I'm going to amend that before the stream gets going, because I can amend things live, because we didn't have both of us on screen when I first made this one. So let me just amend that live. and hopefully Ryan will return before I do that. To say a few things. I was like, quickly fix this.
There's one book I'm supposed to. I wanted to take a brief look into, and I was like, where did I put it?
I need to about that part.
One of the fun things about whenever doing research or anything like this is that it inevitably results in me doing a silly thing where I'll have a book and be like, good, yes, I have this book that I am reading this thing that's very good, and then I'll set it down somewhere I think is safe, somewhere I think will result in me finding it again, and then I walk away from it, and lo and behold, it causes me to go, uh-oh. I don't know where I put it.
Look at that. Fixed it live.
Oh, look at that. That looks very, very nice.
Yeah,
that looks brilliant.
It's actually quite nice just to see it in practice. That Lorebeards logo took me altogether too long to do. It's a combination of all 3 editions of Age of Sigmar dropped together with obviously Lorebeards added to it instead. I'm quite happy with how it turned out in the end. It landed pretty well. Anyway.
Yeah. So... if we are pretty much ready to go, this will take us into super chats. Get the start here, and then once we get through those, we will be off to the races.
Indeed, and just as is always the case, this might be your first Lorebeards stream after all, and you might not know because you might have just gone, Lorebeards Age of Sigmar, I'm diving in. So let's make clear how we do our super chats, so there is absolutely no doubt. We take them in batches. Super chats are chats that people have paid for, so we will always answer them, because if you're happy throwing some money at us to support the channel, we are always happy to reply to you and answer whatever might be said in a super chat. At the moment, if you're watching over on Twitch, we don't have those live, but apparently they're going to be live really, really soon. And if you want to make sure that we get Twitch supported, do please make sure you go over to our Twitch channel, follow it, and we will do our best to get that prepared for bits and all the rest of those fun, exciting pieces that you can throw money at us with. So if you throw a super chat at us, we will answer it. We won't answer it immediately. So if it pops up on our screen, we're not immediately going to stop what we're talking about and dive into it, because we have a lot to cover and we want to make sure we get through that. So we'll take our super chats in batches. If we miss one, sometimes it does occur because of a software issue or because we're stupid. If we miss one, just drop it in the comments immediately. We'll catch it and we'll say, thankfully, sorry for missing that one. Here's the answer to your question. Beyond that, though, yes, I think we should start with our super chats. Where would you like to begin, Mr. Ryan?
First of all, thank you to all the new members that flooded in this morning, or people. Wow, just cool. Thanks. We appreciate that. It's very nice. So thank you for either people refreshing memberships or becoming new members. We appreciate it. Next up, we've got Matthew. Every time you talk about her, I have to play her again on Total War Warhammer 3. A favorite next, Go Trek and Felix, and Neferata. Yep, those are all good. Those are all good things. And speaking of Neferata and Morathi, do be sure to join us on Tuesday, where we will be continuing our What If Morathi Founded the College's Magic stream, because YouTube was losing its goddamn mind last week.
Yeah, it really was.
And having all sorts of problems, but things seem to be much better now, which is great. So yeah, because we'll be continuing that, and someone threw a whole bunch of money at the wall to ensure that there would be a Neferata and Morathi relationship at some point during the stream. We were like, cool, great, we like money, so we'll make that work, and it'll be a good time. Luigi Super, Age of Sigmar retconned the end times to show that the Phoenix Kings were blessed by Ashuran. Also, Age of Sigmar shows Morathi. Age of Sigmar Morathi shows that she only ever cared for herself. So I am going to actually immediately say that I disagree with that. I actually think Age of Sigmar shows the exact opposite. Yeah, I would agree that it shows that Morathi has changed, in that if you go and watch the 2-part stream that me and Andy already did on Morathi, where we did Morathi kind of like pre-Nagaroth and the Morathi post-Nagaroth, one of the things that we discussed that was a constant aspect of her character is that Morathi would often have these very elaborate, very well-designed schemes and plots and plans, and they would ultimately almost always fall apart because she falls in love with someone. That's what would screw her over at the last second. It happened first time with an Aryan, and it happened the second time with Tyrion. Age of Sigmar, we finally see her character step beyond that. And when that moment comes, the narrative even kind of calls it out of this is a moment where she would normally hesitate or she would fail. And in Age of Sigmar, she pushes through.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. Like her character evolves. So I wouldn't say that it shows that she only cared about herself. I don't agree with that reading.
Yeah, I'm going to have some pretty. Let's be honest. I'm going to have some pretty firm views through this stream, where I think both great steps were made and some bad choices were made. And I'm going to explain why I think that when we get there. Now, you might find, as is often the case with Lorebeards, that by the time I get there, I'll have changed my mind. Because a lot of these sources I've read once, and just by talking it through, sometimes you go, oh, wait a minute. No, it works this way. Oh, I'm going to retract my first thought. But I'm pretty sure that when we get to those bits, I'm going to have some pretty strong views.
Yeah, and it should be that way because that's what's going to make the discussion interesting and not just like us regurgitating info at you. That being said, the whole thing about the Phoenix Kings being blessed by Shurin, that one's kind of funny because you're not wrong. That one I agree with, where pre-end times it was the Phoenix Kings were blessed by Shurin, and then the end times said, no, they're not. No, they're not. And then Age of Sigmar goes, no, they were.
No, they are. It's almost like I'm going to be slightly less charitable and suggest that whoever wrote it didn't actually know all the end times material.
That was almost assuredly the case.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, though.
Yeah, me too. Magladraw, forgot to ask during the Queek streams, but do you think Queek's soul was taken by some warrior god when he died since the Great Horned Rat didn't ascend him and he's still in Skavening in some ways, particularly as a warrior? No, that's not how that works.
No, not at all. Not in the slightest. He and we don't know what happens with his soul afterwards and what the Great Horned Rat does or doesn't do with it, but I can say with almost certainty it's not going to any other god bar the Great Horned Rat. And combat and conflict of the type that Queek is known for is no less Great Horned Rat material than scheming or assassination or frenzied biting. All of these are parts of what the Great Horned Rat represent. So the often common choice to say, oh, but he's really like Khorne. No, he's also really like the Great Horned Rat. Stop trying to make all killing Khorne. That's a 40k thing. This is not a Warhammer thing. Warhammer is deeply complex. 40k tends to simplify it all.
Yeah. I would say best case scenario, he became a Verminlord Warbringer. Most likely case scenario, he was one of a billion rats that got close to glory and who died and his soul was devoured or insignificantly forgot among the realm of ruin.
Yeah. It's after all the realm of ruin, not the realm of, yay, I've died.
Yeah. There's no Skaven heaven, sadly. Joe Miller, good morning, lads. Hopefully Andy will enjoy some AOS.
I did.
Magladrov, can't wait until we get to the part where she tries to manipulate Nagash and it goes horribly wrong for her. Oh, hail the Age of Nagash!
I found this interesting because it's mentioned in the first army list. Sorry, I'm going to call them army list because I'm old, but not the next two. In fact, it's almost like they want to drop it.
Yeah, there is a lot of story that gets told in the first battle tome, which actually makes the first battle tome the most important one. If you're trying to study the storyline of the Daughters of Cain, that just stops existing
just
in the later
ones. By the later ones, to the point that it'd be very easy to say that they do not want that to be the case any longer, but it is still there and is worth discussing. Anyway, let's carry on swiftly. We've got a lot to do today.
Becker Player, I'm so excited to learn about the redemption of our glorious queen. I also love how much AOS seems to respect women characters in comparison to Games Workshop's larger catalog.
I'm going to disagree with that to some extent through the course of this stream.
There you go. Albin Lindevik, sure, why not? Apologies. Do we know what Kane thinks about the whole Morathi Kane situation? So, do we know what Kane thinks about it? No.
Thinks is an interesting quick point, but largely because, as it's quite clearly laid out in the battle tome, Kane's dead, dude. Kane's dead. He don't think at all. At best, he's a heart that is nothing more than a piece of artifact to extract blood from and extreme power in turn. But what does he think? Fuck all. But if we go back to the first battle tome, it drops really fascinating facts about the elven gods. They're cyclic. They come back again and again and again. This is a thing, and it's a thing that's sort of not dropped elsewhere. And by that I mean it sort of keeps going.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we'll get into it. We'll get into it.
This is a fun one. That's a fun fact.
Yeah, Darius Rose. Anarian's Crazy X again. He's mine. Okay, I mean, you could pick him. King Anks, thank you. That's a very cute
appreciated.
I like your little snake having a cup of Joe here. Brendan Harold, I wouldn't fall to Chaos. I would fall for Morathi. Yeah, because that's so much better.
I think that this is something that should be made more of a story about, because it isn't. No one falls for Morathi because Morathi only takes elf girls these days. She has almost no interest in anything else. If she was a proper goddess, as we understand it, she would have this. All sorts worshipping Morathi or Morathi Kane, depending upon how you wish to depict it. It's Morathi. All sorts worshipping Morathi. But that doesn't happen because it seems that whoever has considered what divinity is over in Age of Sigmar haven't actually considered what divinity is at all. There is a big question about what maketh a god in Age of Sigmar. And the answer to it is sort of laid into your comment there. So thanks very much for that one.
Serpenza, I've really struggled to get into Age of Sigmar lore, so I'm excited to see this stream to see if it could change my mind. So one of the things I will say that is a good and bad thing about Age of Sigmar is that unlike Warhammer Fantasy has a very easy onboarding process, because the easiest thing you could do to someone that has never engaged with is you go, okay, imagine our world with like a lot of the systems and reality rules and all this other shit that you understand about life on Earth. And then I'm going to take a bunch of crazy cool cultures from across time and I'm going to insert them into the world, make them all fight, all those toys fight each other. And most people go, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And it's usually really easy to get someone to find something they connect with. Age of Sigmar is a much more bizarre onboarding process. And it also, to be, once again, good and a bad thing.
Yeah.
It acts because they weren't as popular as some in GW hoped for. The Stormcast Eternals are a method of onboarding, but they are not like the Space Marines where they are the method of onboarding. So you can come at it from like so many different directions.
I hard agree. Age of Sigmar is challenging. And this is coming from someone who loves his fantasy bullshit. I have found this a challenging read to bring into my headspace. This has not been easy. Some parts of it were easy because of familiarity. Other parts, though, were just a variety of names getting thrown across the page, and the person who wrote it assuming I knew what they all meant. And I didn't. This is particularly the case when it comes to 3rd edition material, where it's an established setting, and they have forgotten, seemingly, that most of the stuff that they're writing about is going to be read for the first time by some new players, because there's so much bullshit in there. I was just left going, yeah, none of this makes sense. This is one where I have to go online to understand half of what's in the book. This is not written as it should be with beginners in mind. It doesn't explain everything in turn, and I find it hard.
Yeah. When we get into the intro, because I think I want to hear Andrew's intro first, and then I'm going to add tidbits of information about why certain things happen the way they did. There are things that you'll look at it, especially looking back, where you'll read and go, why the fuck did they do it this way? And then you'll go, oh, well, this is why. And it's like, okay, that makes sense, but they weren't really future-proofing it very well. It's like, no, future-proofing was not. Age of Sigmar now, in like 4th edition, is doing a much better job of future-proofing. But like 1st and 2nd, they were like, oh, fantasy, AOS if you've gotten to this point. And it's just going to assume you know what's going on. And if you don't, oh boy, it's going to be like throwing words at you and be like, you know what this is? And this event happened. And this event happened. You're like, who? What?
Yeah, and I have an angle on this as well, but it'll be interesting to see where we land in this one, I think.
Yeah. Darius Rose, damn it, Sotek, you made me have a man crush on Krokgar. He's pretty cool. More on him? I don't think there's more to say. I really think we kind of exhausted it. Adding him to hubbies I could fix, along with what are you just collecting broken men? I mean, I've heard of people like that, but along with Battle Beast and Conquest after watching Invincible. Yes, I have terrible taste in men. That's fair. You know what? That's fair. At least you're aware of it. Zero Daimu. In the current material, is she still in contact with Malarian, or is he hiding in the shadows even from her? Very excited to see what you guys are doing in Age of Sigmar. So, Malarian... Yeah, Malarian is very much a still deep in the shadows character. He is not
because they haven't made him.
Yeah, he has not been fully. Yeah, he hasn't been fully revealed yet. What's interesting is in first edition they made a beautiful piece of art for Malarian, like where he's this big dragon elf god thing. Since then, he has been very much off to the side.
In the shadows.
Yeah, he does show up a number of times. I'm going to talk about when he shows up, but like in the story of Morathi, he shows up, I think, 3 times.
Yeah.
So we'll get into it, but right now he is still very much not
in the shadows.
Yeah, he's in the shadows. He's doing little gooey stuff.
Like the Rasmus said back in the 90s, in the shadows.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of jokes that I frankly kind of agree with, that Malarian is very much an oh shit button for AOS, where like if sales ever start to dip, they'll be like, Malarian! But we'll see if that's true or not. King Angst, I had it earlier. Age of Sigmar, where I have to worry that my army is going to turn into Imperial Guard, #free Anvil Guard. The good news is I don't think that'll ever happen to the cities of Sigmar. The second thing is we will talk about Anvil Guard. Anvil Guard is a
core to this one.
Yeah, Anvil Guard, or as it's now known, Har-Curon, I think. I think that's the right city, but yeah, the city of scales. But we will,
yeah,
we will get into that because this was a huge fucking deal when it happened. It still kind of is, but it was like, man, it was where Age of Sigmar went from like I'm enjoying to this to like holy fuck, like I am in. But we'll get to that. Czar 94 can't stay work. Bleh. That being work on a Sunday, you poor thing. That being said, Morathi is really fun in Age of Sigmar. And her mini with the Shadow Queen is my favorite mini to build and paint. Really looking forward to catching up after work. Yeah, easiest when on board AOS.
Watching later on, Czar.
Yes, appreciate that. Thank you. And yes, she does have a gorgeous mini. She does. Like, god damn, that's a mini.
Hey, I own that one.
Vigarian, very excited to see you guys talk about AOS lore. Curious on your thoughts on the mechanics of 4th edition. My cousin Matt is the lead game designer. Oh,
hey, cousin Matt.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly is an interesting point, to which I'll immediately say, mechanics, not the right stream.
Yeah, no. I will simply say I'm enjoying them. They're fun. I like the 4th ed books. Yeah, we don't have time to get into it more than that. Azure Shadow 88 is Krokar named after Rekgar the Transformer. That would surprise me. Probably.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't mention it the other day because I honestly don't know, but it seems really likely that he is.
Ricky, at least they changed it slightly. Ricky Chapman, we love the time Morathi fought the White Dwarf, and he looks at her and just says, "You've aged poorly." It takes Morathi a moment to realize who she's fighting, and she gets frothing mad. We will talk about her run-in with Grombrindle, because it is a very genuinely interesting moment, and for most people, I would say 99% of people that read it, they don't realize how interesting the meeting is between the two of them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't realize that they know each other much more intimately than...
Intimately?
Yeah. No, okay. So is Kane dead in AOS? Yes.
Yes. Or are they somewhere? Possibly, because Age of Sigmar is definitely a setting that will change its rules each time they decide to.
Oh, yeah. Age of Sigmar is a setting that if you go into it thinking that, oh, well, at least they're not going to like rule of cool something out of bullshit, then you're in for an ugly shock. They will rule the fuck out of you in Age of Sigmar. They do not care. Biofoot, really looking forward to exploring AOS as a community. I really like the Morathi picked up Teclis's off-cast children as allies. I think it's a really interesting move. Shout out to the Path to Glory League. I have been having a lot of fun. Lorebeards, we have a Path to Glory League of Age of Sigmar. We're in season 2. It's been a ton of fun. I've streamed every game of this season, so if you're interested in watching some Age of Sigmar games, you can find those over on the Loremaster of Sotek channel. Now I Start with the Dawn. Fun fact, End Times was written by one person. The Changeling! It makes too much sense. Honestly, that would be the best explanation.
I'd take it.
Or why it rage baits everyone so hard. John Scarecrow, can't wait for the episode on the Necroquake. Well, that would probably be more of a Nagash episode.
Yeah.
But before we would do that, I would actually want to go back and revisit Nagash on fantasy side, because I think we could revisit that character. Ricardo Andre, Elven Gods Cyclical, also 40k. Your brain ponders on the gods being reborn as mortal avatars, and that Yniad will only wake up when she gathers the Pantheon.
So I will be discussing that. Not much, but I am definitely going to be hitting on that because it's one of my general criticisms.
Thank you for coming. Remember, Albin, really appreciate the support. Zylok, do AOS characters know about their old world selves? Yes, some of them remember the old world. Some of them don't. It depends on the character.
Yep.
Time Pirate, I find the best elevator pitch for Age of Sigmar is God of War 2018, but Warhammer 5. That is fucking hilarious. That's a great way to pitch that. The Stormcast in particular line up with Odin's Einhard Yar. AOS is probably the best sitting for a mythology nerd. If you are into grand epic mythology, it is right up your alley. It's less historical.
I'd actually say that's fair. And I would say in some respects, it's more fair than using Warhammer as a starting point, because they change so much about the cosmology of what gods are when you move into Age of Sigmar.
Oh boy,
and it's really unrelated to what Warhammer or 40k offers for how gods work. Less so at the beginning, but most certainly as it moves into its own thing.
Yep. And then the last one before we get into the intro, 30 minutes in. Crazy one. Morning, chaps. I struggled to conceptualize the difference of power scaling between fantasy main characters who made it to AOS and became gods. How would you describe the differences and similarities? Okay.
This is sort of going to come up through the stream too.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the briefest clip answer I can give is that the term God in Age of Sigmar is grabbed like a piece of taffy and it's stretched and then put back together and stretched and put back together. And it's going to get really weird. Because different authors that come into AOS handle it differently, where you will sometimes find characters that are the best example I can give is like God, it's really hard to give it in a very short thing. The biggest difference, I would say, Andy might not agree with this, but I'm just going to give you a brief thing, and he'll cover it in his intro, I think. But in Warhammer, actually, okay, no, that's not answering the question.
Squatting in this one, aren't you?
Okay, so to answer your specific question, the characters in fantasy that became gods in Age of Sigmar are significantly more powerful than they were in fantasy. From a power scaling perspective, it is like comparing a seed against a redwood giant. Like, they are significantly more powerful, significantly larger, big, scary goofballs. Many of which are given their quote-unquote gods through the concept that they are so interwoven with one of the realms, or they have co-opted a divine power from the previous setting that they have become immortal beings that theoretically could be killed, but even if they were theoretically killed, they could also theoretically come back. It's a mess, but that's the easiest way I can answer that.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the far shorter version of it's a mess.
Yep. And with that, we got to get going.
Alrighty. I have pondered for some time how to do this intro, because, as you all know, I love to go back in time and start at the beginning and take you through to the end, and then discuss the stories that we're about to slowly but surely examine. And to a degree, that's exactly what I'm going to do here. But before we do, I'm going to have a slightly different intro, because this is our very first stream on Age of Sigmar. And that's to say, who am I in terms of Age of Sigmar? And the answer to that is nobody. Now, unlike Warhammer, where I have done a significant amount of contribution towards the setting as a whole, I've written huge swathes of material for it and been published in a variety of different outlets. I've worked for Black Library, I've worked for the role-playing game across various editions. I've done a bunch of things. When it comes to Age of Sigmar, I have done nothing more than look upon the game from the outside. So what do I know? Unlike many who are fans of Age of Sigmar, I came into the stream knowing relatively little, but I wasn't without any knowledge. I had bought the first edition, the second edition. In fact, I'd bought all the games because I love to take a look at what the next step is. Does that mean I have a bunch of boxes that I don't use full of miniatures I haven't touched? Yes. But that doesn't mean that I didn't read them. I did. I took a quick check of what the setting is at that point, how they determined to update it, how much material they dropped into the books in the first one round. Very, very little at all, given that it was the introduction to the entire setting. But I've also played some of the games. Now, Age of Sigmar itself, I barely played. I tried out the rules at the beginning, wasn't that happy with them. Moved into the second edition, went, I see what they're doing. Ad infinitum into where we are today. I have, however, played some things like Underworlds a lot. I played that for a year with my youngest daughter. We played that game, but all the expansions did far too much. Was the background what interests me? No. It was just a good game, and I enjoyed playing it. Somewhat similarly with the Warhammer Quest game, I quite enjoyed that. Well, more than one of them now. I quite enjoyed them, pardon me, but I didn't really play them much. I never, and I'm quite happy to put this front and center, never has the background interested me. It just didn't grip me. It didn't excite me. It didn't make me go, this is Warhammer that I love. But there's a reason for that. And that is going to be a core part of what this introduction is. Because will Morathi break me down? Because I love Morathi. I love her character. I think everything that's been done with her has been terrible. But underneath it all is a brilliant character that could potentially be realized. Has it been realized as we move over into Age of Sigmar? Now, if you watched our previous streams about Morathi back in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, rather than the Age of Sigmar version, we hinted that Age of Sigmar did many things with her character that should have happened in Warhammer Fantasy because of who she is, what she's done, her history, and it was realized much more cleanly in Age of Sigmar. Now that I've read it, rather than just picked up the little bits, do I still agree? That's going to be a part of this entire stream, going through it all, and then at the end, hitting some sort of conclusion as to, does this feel like Age of Sigmar's worthwhile? And if you're coming into this stream wondering, should I be interested in it? It's a relatively good place to begin. Now, for Age of Sigmar, it starts in 2015 with the first edition. And this is the first time we get to see Morathi in Age of Sigmar. We don't really. What we get is the little war scrolls that they released at the time where you could basically say, hey, I've got a bunch of Warhammer miniatures. How do I use it in Age of Sigmar? And they released a Dark Elf one in there, which when you dive into the actual detail of it, refers to them as elves rather than elf, even though the front title is elf. And we get our first rules for Morathi for Age of Sigmar. And they're fine. We don't need to go into those because they're going to get overwritten relatively soon, because this is the world that was version of Morathi. And you can now play with the world that was version in the Age of Sigmar rule set. I did this. I used the Dark Elves. Back in 2015, I played with Morathi using this set, and by the end of about 4 games, decided I didn't like the Age of Sigmar rules very much, which wasn't that I hated them, I didn't like them. Now, if you know me, you know what's going to happen next, and it did. I immediately wrote my own rules. In that, I wrote an entire set of skirmish rules for Warhammer Fantasy Battle that I thought would be better, because I had a bug in my head. I wanted to see it out. I created a whole new set of rules. All of Lindsay's Dark Elf army, because my wife, Lindsay, played Dark Elves at the time, got rebased onto circular bases, and that was a good time. 2015 presented Age of Sigmar. Now, what is Age of Sigmar, for those of you out there? It's a setting that takes place long after Warhammer Fantasy Battle, after the world that was blew up. And it all became its own new thing much, much later. But most importantly, what did you get with the set back then? Because it set the tone. What you got was, and I'm going to be relatively blunt with my descriptions, which might upset some, but they're going to be blunt because it might help for those of you who've never seen Age of Sigmar get a bit of context. They decided that they liked 40k and its success. So they tried to replicate it with fantasy. They destroyed the old fantasy world and they brought it back to life in a new form in Age of Sigmar. And instead of doing the classic fight that you got in 40k, which was Space Marines versus Chaos, they made that for Age of Sigmar and made it Sigmar Marines versus Chaos. So the very first set is humans versus humans. The first time ever that Warhammer Fantasy would pitch no fantasy species as part of their core release. And I remember discussing at the time going, seriously, is this what you're going with? I've got my own little bit over here. I have my own notes at the time because I was writing notes about it, where I was like, they've released Just Humans for their new game. I've got my own little thing when I was still writing bits and pieces.
Humans.
Just humans. Now, admittedly, you could call Space Marines just humans, but they are. There's no elves, there's no dwarfs, there's no fantasy. You got a couple of monsters thrown in here, and the giant golden warriors that were the Sigmar Marines are Stormcast Eternals were obviously not basic humans. And on the other side, Chaos are never basic humans, Khorne in this particular case. But here we have humans versus humans, and it's so 40k without being 40k that it's almost painful. Instead of having spaceships to get you to your point of battle, you've got realm gates to take you to your point of battle. You can basically teleport anywhere within the mortal realms and have a fight and then go back to your respective places. And that, at the time, left me cold. At the time, I read it all. I tried to like it because I wanted to. I love Warhammer, but I was left going, somebody doesn't like Warhammer. Somebody likes 40k. And to me, it stunk of corporate involvement. There was no great story being told yet. In fact, the rulebook's almost devoid of it. It's devoid of setting and high on concept. And it felt like the miniatures led the story. They made some miniatures and said, how can we justify these cool things? I know, we'll make a story that makes sense of them. And we ended up with giant white male god faces off against Khorne, the blood god. It's just men fighting men doing men things. Going contrary to our earlier discussion about how Age of Sigmar is much more diverse in its approach. At the beginning, it really wasn't. And I mean, really wasn't. It was men versus men doing men things. Big soldiers for little boys to go play toy soldiers with. And the game wasn't great. It could be summed up in 2 pages of rules badly. And I didn't enjoy it. And thus, the next almost 3 years are dedicated by Age of Sigmar to justify their new setting, to add all the cool new things that they thought were cool and new. And often it was a previous thing from Warhammer Fantasy that we think is cool, and we'll now make an army around it. Take a look at the Fire Slayers, for example. And that always left me cold because there was little in the way of originality coming out. And that meant that when something, the Caradhran Overlords, or what would eventually become our Idoneth Deepkin, when something original did come along, it got my curiosity, but never got my passion. Because by this point, I had it ingrained in me that it was just their attempt to consolidate their intellectual property so no one else could copy it by giving it new names, by giving it new situations that people couldn't come along and say, look, here's my generic fantasy elf. You can use it in anything because we renamed them elves over here, or Duarden, or whatever they renamed their various fantasy species as. So no one could ever sell Warhammer miniatures again. It totally failed in all respects. People continue to make their generic versions of everything, and it made no impact at all. But that seemed to be what it was. And they were 40K-izing everything. And I was pretty upset. I wasn't upset because they blew up the Warhammer world. I was upset because of the lack of imagination that came about in the next process. They didn't feel like they were creating this new piece of art that they cherished, that they loved. It felt like corporate asked them to make something and they made it. And if you want to have a modern analogy for that, it felt like AI slop. It felt like stuff that was just copied from previous stuff, mangled together and thrown out there. And it felt like it was miniature-led, not story-led. They didn't have great stories they wanted to tell. They had miniatures they had to justify. And that kind of sucked. Come 2018, everything started to change. In 2018, we got the first thing that actually drew my eye. Why did it draw my eye? Because they finally accepted, front and center, one of the coolest things they had with Age of Sigmar was that it was a sequel to Warhammer. Previous to that, they were almost seemingly ashamed of it. Almost as if what had come before, they didn't want to discuss because they were making their new thing and they wanted that to land hard. And Morathi was at the very center of everything that was about to change. In fact, she is the first character that they pick up and they say, hey, you know Warhammer that you loved? It's here. Bang. With a heavy bang. And out comes their new Tome of Dark Elves. Except, of course, it's not a Tome of Dark Elves, is it? No, it's the Daughters of Cain is what they're called, isn't it?
Yes.
Make sure I don't get my name wrong. I will get names wrong as I go, and I will apologize as I said. The old war scrolls that had come before were dropped out. We got our first battle tome for the Daughters of Cain, and they did with Morathi what would become a template for Age of Sigmar, and that was a giant centerpiece model of awesomeness, surrounded by an army of miniatures, and away we go. Now, the army list came out, of course, the battle tome, and it made an entire new story for Morathi, which we'll be going into here. And it was interesting, but I had immediate criticisms. Loosely speaking, for those of you who know your end times, Morathi gobbled up. Well, she crawls herself out. She does a pretty horrible crawl through the realm of Ulgu. She eventually meets up with her son. They don't really discuss this beyond saying, oh, they don't like each other, but they work together immediately. And then they create an entire new city. And this is the first part. I remember when I first read it that I went, you what now? Because on one side, we've got her jealousy that her son has become a god. Malarian, the god. And on the other side, Malarian and her can only build their first great city together. And they do. Back in the Age of Myth, her and Malarian get together and build a great city together, with her magics not being that much less impressive than his, but still not being divine. And it immediately made me ask this question. Well, what the fuck's a god then? I mean, why does he even need help? What's going on here? Why is he so integral to what's to come? And I think that's one of the questions that was left open. And as we move through later publications, they never really pick up with, because it's back in the Age of Myth, which matters so much less to what's happening in the current times. So we get our story of Morathi having pulled herself out of Slaanesh, and we get the story of her meeting a bunch of gods, her falling out with those gods with an interesting tale, which we will get onto, which gets ditched later in other versions of the story. Then her turning her back on those, walking out and doing her own thing. Malarian, for one reason or another, giving her a tract of land, which is definitely a thing that he would do. Her down there in this horrible place, carving out a new version of religion, which is just the old version of religion brought forth. And that's when I went, holy shit, they're just going to use all the same miniatures, aren't they? Mm-hmm. And when I was reading it, I went, oh, it's miniature-led still. Oh, I get it. All they're really doing is adding one new miniature. It's Morathi. It's just a miniature. They just need to justify using all the old miniatures again. So the story, yet again, was nothing more than led by miniature design. It was led not by creativity and a desire to tell a cool tale about Morathi. It was purely driven by the necessity of corporate needs to use the old miniatures. And I will admit, I went, oh, that's really disappointing. They're not telling cool stories because they've got cool stories to tell. They are justifying the miniatures that they have. And that is this army list in a nutshell. It does a bunch of cool bits and pieces, and it explains all of the reasons for why they have those miniatures in a slightly new way, but it does so by bringing in loads of 40k-isms. Everything that they had started 3 years previously continues with their cyclic nature, which was mentioned in the Q&A at the beginning, with the cyclic natures of the elven gods being mentioned, the same way the Eldar gods in 40k were kind of this. And in fact, as you look at it, they're even breaking them up into various factions that could work in the same way as 40k codices. And I just looked at it and went, holy crap, the Daughters of Cain are just a 40k Dark Eldar faction now with all the miniatures from Warhammer. And they've just mulched them up, and there isn't a single bit of actual creativity in this. There is nothing that exciting or new added. It's nothing more than, how do I get Morathi that used to exist into Morathi that we now know does exist? And I think the coolest part of it all was when they were creative and they built a new miniature. Because Morathi's miniature, pretty fucking cool. Split into two forms, one of which was little Morathi with a pair of wings for reasons they never really go into, and one was giant Morathi who had turned into a huge snake Medusa, because clearly whoever was designing the miniatures liked the snake Medusa, blood rat Medusa types that had come before and decided Morathi was going to be that. Maybe they just watched Jason and the Argonauts and really liked Medusa. Who can say? But that's what they built, and it was pretty fucking awesome. And they made up a story about how being inside Slaanesh turned her into this giant snake, Medusa, winged thing, and she hated it. So after a long time, she used magic to turn herself into the pretty version, but with wings, because why she got wings? We don't want to talk about that. That would be a mutation that goes against everything we've established for her character. She just does, okay? Right, gotcha. Okay, she's got shadowy wings from Ulgu. That'll do. Sounds perfect. She's got her shadowy wings. That's cool.
It's goofier than that. It's goofier.
I know. I know.
I'll tell you what they actually are in a little bit, but yeah, go ahead.
And I was like, yeah, whatever. It felt like they were coming up with a shitty, goofy answer for it. In fact, yeah, give me the goofy answer because I can't remember the exact one.
So they're bladed wings. So they're pieces of metal that she uses to stab people. They can also make her fly. But yeah, they're melee.
They're
weapons.
Goofy as fuck, and they're also against the core concept that they put as her character, which is she wants to be what she was before. The great ethereal beauty that she had, the most perfect beauty, and it even says it, which really upset me. It says it in this first battle tome. She was so beautiful, the gods themselves were jealous, but they didn't move in her because it was natural. And that's what she wanted to reclaim. And instead, the great horrific monster that she is what she had become. And she figures out after a long time how to get rid of that, and still has the mutation thing going on. It's weird. It's a story that's been built to support the miniature, not the character. And it upset me at the time. And I remember reading it going, fuck no. When I went back and read it again, if anything, it was even clearer how much the miniature and the miniature line as a whole dictated every story that they made. There was nothing here that was done because they had a cool story they had to tell. Everything written in this book felt like we're justifying selling you these miniatures. And it made me feel a bit icky. Like, I can build a better story than this with exactly the same stuff. Has no one sat down and just gone, how can we make the coolest Warhammer shit ever? And the answer was, nah, they've basically gone, she's trapped in Slaanesh. We'll get her out of Slaanesh. We'll bring her to her son because we've already said the son's attached to Ulgu. And then we'll just throw her into a quiet realm where she gets to recreate Warhammer from the past. Yay.
No, not like Kerrigan's. Like it's
Kerrigan's
literally
cool.
It's literally like a metal harness. Like they're not flesh. They're not a part of her body. They're like a metal.
I missed that. That's if anything worse. So, cut a long story short, I wasn't frightfully happy, and I read that and I moved on. And I think by this time I'd given Age of Sigmar 3 years to get its act together, and it kind of didn't. So I wasn't hugely happy. However, a few things occur in very quick succession. 2019, we get our first novels about the Dark Elves. We get Coven of Blood in particular. That was an interesting read, where it dives into the society of the elves seen through the eyes of 3 different story threads, with a lot of what Morathi is doing with religion, and it really does span back to what was happening back in the Warhammer world. It felt a little bit like somebody had just gone, can you please justify a Warhammer mixed with 40k set of Dark Elf stories? And the answer was, sure, let's go to town.
Yeah, also was one of the first big female authors we finally got for Age of Sigmar,
which is lovely. And they're pretty cool. And they were fun to revisit, but I at no point went, I feel like Age of Sigmar is justified by these stories. Instead, there were fun stories inside of Age of Sigmar, but they could have been in 40k or Warhammer with almost no rewriting at all. And I found that an interesting insight into what Age of Sigmar was slowly becoming. As we then move into Broken Realms. And this is where Morathi is at the forefront of what Age of Sigmar will become. Because when we hit Broken Realms, we find out that Age of Sigmar has decided that Age of Sigmar is rubbish. And what they're going to do with Age of Sigmar is they're going to tell a story now we've realized that we weren't telling any big, massive, cool story. We were just talking about Age of Myth, Age of Chaos, now Age of Sigmar, big war, yeah! Well, that's boring. No, it's not. It's cool. What do you mean it's not cool? Okay, well, we'll tell you a cool story. And everything that they had set up with Morathi started to make a little more sense. Because unlike what Warhammer did, and to a degree 40k had done, but was moving from into a new one, is it never told an ongoing story. And Age of Sigmar went, hey, you know Morathi who wants to become a god? Well, settle in, because we're about to fucking do that. And they basically turn Morathi into the Warhammer character, single example of what Age of Sigmar is. So, you know all that weird shit we told you happens in Age of Sigmar? We're now going to let you see it in practice using Morathi. And Morathi goes from being effectively a faction leader into a god. The story, I'm sure, is going to deeply amuse you. It's got holes bigger than any piece of Swiss cheese, but it's kind of fun. And it's got all sorts of crazy.
It's an accurate description.
And the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. But the thing that bugged me most about this whole thing, and I think you're going to quite enjoy the story when we get to it, is that, again, it's miniature-led. Because how do they finish it? Like this. So Morathi came in. Morathi, who was this big, horrible snake person, had figured out how to make everyone think she looked like a little goddess, because we've got that miniature. We still have that miniature. So whatever we do, we're going to make exactly the same situation again after she becomes a goddess. Strangely enough, she is this perfect, beautiful version of Morathi, but she's also this big, giant snake thing. Yay! And I just went, oh, such an opportunity.
There's a very funny point when you're reading through Broken Realms, right before, which we'll get into the book release in a second, where you're reading, you're going, this model really feels like it should have came out after this book instead of before this book. That would have made way more sense.
And I felt like, upon reading that they should have made the first Morathi model different. They made a smaller one, or just made the single beautiful one, so they could have had an alternate one
at least.
Or done something like that would have made a better overall feel. But no, they basically just recreate the army, but now say Morathi is a god. But this is really important because it helps people who are new to Age of Sigmar see the processes that are involved. Do they explain what becoming a god means? Absolutely freaking not. We'll go into exactly what occurs and some of the interesting choices they made with the story and what's going on inside Slaanesh when we get there. But they don't really explain what the difference is between being a god and being what she was before. And the answer is, in reality, in terms of the game, nothing, almost. I mean, she's not that much more powerful, but she is. She doesn't do that much more, but she does, because now everyone knows she's a god. And then she goes off and faces other things, and various other stories happen afterwards, because from this point onwards, Morathi becomes an integral component of what Age of Sigmar's plots are, because she's one of their gods. And she's off doing stuff. She takes one of the most important cities, showing how Age of Sigmar is a constantly evolving setting. It's not like what Warhammer Fantasy was beforehand. It's telling an ongoing tale. She takes this city. Oh, there's reprisals. Oh, but she gets back together again with other people. And we'll discuss exactly what her character is throughout this. And by the time that we hit, in quick succession, the second edition of the Battle Tome, then the third just a year later, because, oh shit, well, let's change some shit. By the time we get this and the story's completely updated, it's basically a copy-paste of everything they wrote before with some details that they didn't like removed, like that time when she taunted Nagash or tried to seduce him. Let's remove that, sounds stupid. That cyclic elven god things, let's remove that, it's from 40k. They were all amending stuff in the second, and then the third one comes along and it's really not really any different to the one that came before, except it adds tons of cool just game-related stuff. And I would argue it's the first time that I picked up a battle tome and went, we've got an army list. in the same fashion that we used to have army lists back in Warhammer. Now, the later edition army lists, the mid editions, our 6 and our 7s weren't that great, but 8 was pretty damn stonking, as was 4th. And it landed in that 4th, 5th to 8th area. Over 100 pages worth of pretty cool awesome. And in some respects, it gives me hope for the old world and what eventually might become their equivalent of army lists, in that with later editions, they might bulk out. But it was a pretty chunky, bulky thing. I read through it, and yes, I put myself in the position of someone who was a new reader. It's not very well written for a new reader, and really uses altogether too many things that make no sense to a new reader. Our Necroquakes is a perfect example of that. You just read that and go, well, what the fuck is this? And they don't use the tone of a thing called the Necroquake or a great event that occurred. They just go, the Necroquake occurred, this goes on, and you're like, what the fuck is all this nonsense? And this is something that I think Age of Sigmar suffers from deeply. This expectation that if you're buying the shit, you know the shit. That should never be the expectation. Every book should be pitched at a 12 to 15-year-old who has never played the game before or read anything. So everything is gently explained. Because unlike Warhammer, as Ryan said earlier, you can't do the easy thing of, hey, this undead army, it's just ancient Egyptians, but, you know, with skeletons. And you go, gotcha. Now, you could with this one say, hey, you know this entire army of female elves, it's just dark elves from Warhammer. And if you know Warhammer, it's easy. It's really easy if you know Warhammer. But if you don't know Warhammer, this army is bonkers because it's a mixture of Roman-style gladiators with crazed, death-worshipping lunatics and blood. And even worse, when you read the story says all of the religious stuff was chosen by Morathi because we had those models. I mean, because we decided that Cain was important, because she thought that'd be a useful way to control them. And now she's in a position where she's fucked, because if they ever find out that she's not Cain, they're going to kill her. They're going to try. She's going to lose everyone who worships her. And they even, before that, add that little bit, particularly with the novel, saying all of the religious stuff is empowering her and making her stronger. It's empowering her and making her stronger. It's where she's drawing a lot of her strength from. And she has basically crafted her own demise by the way they've set it up. And it's not because her character would have chosen to do this. When she first arrived, all the way back when Millennium gives her a place, she could have said and done anything. But the miniatures meant that she had to choose Cain. And it's left her in a stupid place at the end of the game. At the end of where we currently are right now, where we have Morathi Cain, who's just Morathi, holding the heart of Cain in one of her hands. She's not Cain at all. They state it in black and white in the book and in the previous tome as well. In black and white, she is not Morathi. And there is all manner of folk amongst her followers. Cain, pardon me. She is not Cain. And there's all manner of folk kicking around going, if she's not what she says she is, we're going to be angry. Ooh. And I don't know if she is what she says she is, along with others going, you know what, it's probably just wise to accept her as she is because she'll just kill us if we don't. And it's a really weird setup that makes no sense when you look at the overall character of Morathi, who is, as she is depicted frequently throughout the tomes, as one of the most intelligent strategists that they have in the mortal realms. She wins fight after fight after fight, to the point that they have to call out, she lost a battle or two in a couple of points in the tome, because she's so enormously successful. And that's combined with one of the most stupid decisions that are ever made. So the end of my intro, before we dive into the specifics of the stories, is this. I don't know Age of Sigmar that well. And it was super interesting diving into it. Because what I concluded after my first read through and then my second stab at going through it again for a second time before this stream was clearly almost every story beat is decided by the miniatures. Not because it's a cool story. Not because it's a story they want to tell. And sometimes, because of the miniatures, they make a good story. But sometimes they make an absolutely bobbin story that makes no sense at all, and they gloss over it. The number of times that there'll be something in one of the lists that says, and then they did this, but we won't go into the details of that, and now this happens. And you're left going, I think I need details because this doesn't really make sense. I think I really need details here. Why are these elf gods doing this way? Because they are. Gotcha. Let's just not worry about why. And Age of Sigmar, at this point in my reading, feels like that. But through the course of the stream, as we dive into some of the details, you might find that my opinion is going to change. Because Ryan's going to dive in. He's going to start providing context to some of the things that I've just read about pretty recently. And some of it I'll go, oh, that makes more sense. Some of it I'll go, if anything, that makes less sense. And by the end of the stream, if you are new to Age of Sigmar, hopefully, like me, you will come to your own conclusion as to whether you think it's cool or not. Or if you are not new to Age of Sigmar, and perhaps you're a fan or you're a tepid reader or whatever it might be, you'll come to perhaps a different or the same conclusion that you already have. But whatever the case, hopefully by the end of this one, we'll all have had time to look at some of these stories in a way that none of us have thought about before.
And with that, we're going to very quickly go through super chats that have come in during the intro. Darius, has Tyrion been hinted at in AOS or met Morathi? Tyrion has appeared a number of times. He's not, funny enough, this goes to what Andy was saying. He's not playable yet, so he's very much in the background of what a lot's going on. Has he met Morathi? Yes. Do we know what was said or what happened? No.
Oh, we know some of what happens because they all band together during the Age of Myth to track Slanesh. And Tyrion, Teclis, and Morathi are pretty much, Malarian, are all bestest buds, honest, as they all work towards the same end because they're all elves, all with the same goal. So they didn't just do a small amount together. They did a lot.
There is a big team up, yes.
Yeah, and how much do they discuss in Arian during that?
Yeah, you would hope a decent. Gnostic Lumbe, Morathi, Mo problems? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Drake Claw, want to say I'm incredibly happy to see AOS get this time in the sun. I think you both can be an excellent bridge point between old world fans getting into the mortal realms. Yeah. I'm very curious to see the discussion. I would love for someone to make a thread on the Discord about this particular stream and would love to see the discussion y'all have afterwards. That's one of the ones I think I'd really like to jump into. But first edition was a complete waste of potential. I mostly agree with you, but I do think the Rome Gate Wars had some strong moments, but very few people have read them because even at the time, they were very giant, expensive books. Like, even compared to books nowadays, these fuckers are thick. Yeah. And they didn't sell very well because of how expensive and big they were. And a lot of people just were like, ugh, because the rules were trash. And a lot of the lore was trash. Basically, if you were not a Stormcast Eternal player, first edition was pretty rough lore-wise. The Daughters of Cain book was had no business being released in first edition, to be completely blunt. Everything Andy said about Daughters of Cain first edition, couldn't agree more with. That book is ridiculous. And it literally was, look, here's Morathi and all of your old Dark Elf models. Have fun.
From my perspective, I remember when it came out, it's a little bit like, all that shit that we tried to distance ourselves from, we finally accepted we're taking it on board. And Morathi was at the spearhead, the very tip of bringing Warhammer back into Age of Sigmar. And if that's something that you like the sound of, then this stream might take you towards a position of going, actually, for all that army list had a stupid, and I do think that the first edition one wasn't great, a stupid Genesis and looks rubbish from the outside, it brought so much good to what Age of Sigmar would become.
Yeah, and once I'll tell you, you'll know, because I'll let you know when we hit this is when second edition starts. That's where someone shows up and goes, get that shit out of here. All right, here's what's going on. And it's very funny when you're reading it.
It really is.
Serpanza, Big Soldiers for Little Boys is an amazing Warhammer line. Yeah.
And it really, the first edition felt like that. It felt like that was their only consideration, and they forgot that one of the greatest appeals of Warhammer is that it tells great stories. And the first edition felt like they forgot the great stories. And instead, they were just telling a story about the miniatures that they'd made, and it wasn't a great one.
Yeah, once again, I'll say, Rome Gate Wars had some cool stories, but once again, if you weren't in it for the 4 books that were all, I think, at least $60 each, maybe $70, and then a 9-part Black Library series that most people didn't care about because Stormcast. Drakelaw also consistent with research would be Mortal Realms Explained, going into how the plays really work. The realms don't need a monster. Yeah, oh man, that would. First of all, there's a guest I would very much like to talk to having on for something like that. Second of all, we would genuinely have to do one per realm because you could not do it for all of them. It would be obnoxious.
And I think our first Lorebeards Age of Sigmar streams are going to be focusing on the key bridge points between Warhammer and Warhammer, so that we can both use the Warhammer Fantasy Lorebeards to say this is what we had, and use the Age of Sigmar Lorebeards to say, and this is what it's become, to hopefully give you an opportunity to see what Age of Sigmar offers, some of which might make you go, that's amazing, some of which you just might fall dead at, and that's okay. There's no right response to any of this.
Yeah, Corsia, Morathi versus Ariel in a death battle type of arena. Who would win? Whoever the writer wants to win. Haha. But my money would probably be on Morathi against Ariel, but it would be Alariel, but it would be really close.
Yeah. First edition, Alariel easy. Second edition, it gets complicated. Third edition, maybe Morathi.
Vigarian, do you think we'll ever see a lore first approach taken from GW nowadays? I doubt it. Running a good story and a cast of interesting characters, then making models afterwards. No, never like that.
So this is what it used to be with Warhammer Fantasy Battle, in that they would write their army lists, and then models and art would be commissioned to support it. And a fine example of that, and seeing it in practice when it didn't land very well, is the Undead Army list that was released for the 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy. And they made a Nagash character for that. A Nagash character we all know and love for a variety of reasons, all the way through to Age of Sigmar. And Nagash had a piece of art commissioned and a model commissioned separately. So we ended up with a cool piece of art for Nagash by Mark Gibbons. And then the model that came out for it was crap. Really bad. Just bad, and looked nothing like the art because they were commissioned separately. But it shows that the models and the art were coming after the writing, and the stories were being built because they were awesome and cool, and they thought these were the cool stories that made for great armies, rather than we'll make cool miniatures and then figure out how to make armies out of them.
Yeah, easiest way to show you what the company works like now, think about how successful Space Marine 2 is, where like some video game guys got together, and they're like, oh, we're gonna tell a cool story about like a group of like 5 Space Marines. Which is like, your core squad of 3, and then like the captain, the Scottish captain guy, whatever. And a lot of people were like, oh, these are really cool characters. I'm really excited to see what GW is gonna do with them. And GW turned right around and said, oh, okay, so 2 of them get models. The ones that didn't get models, they're dead. They're dead. Fuck you. They're dead. They died off screen. The end. And people were really upset because one of those characters especially had a whole thing where like he had like grown up and survived like a chaos raid and had a bunch of really unique story building in the background. And because they didn't get minis, GW's like, don't fucking care. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, quite. I'm going to bring in a quick comment from Mornington in between. Imagine if they wrote Nagash's lore based on the original model. Imagine the God of Undeath being that. And in some respects, that's the issue that I was having as I was going through the books. Because if that had happened, Nagash would be a goofier, weirder character. And instead, we got ourselves the Lord of Undeath. And we got the Lord of Undeath first, and the miniature didn't match up to that. And when eventually it did, during the end times, we finally got the Nagash that we deserved model-wise. And it's a different way of creating. Is it better? At the moment, I don't think so. But I may be convinced otherwise should Age of Sigmar land in a way that makes me excited.
Yeah, speaking of which, we gotta speed up. Any of GW threatens to beat you with phone books, would you write AOS lore for Morathi? How would you tackle it? I feel like Andy would
yes,
do that very easily.
I mean, yeah, it'd be easy. And of course I'd do it. If somebody comes to me and asks me to do a thing, I'm always up for doing stuff. It depends how much work is involved. But that's the sort of stuff that us writery types...
the Lorebeards before? Yeah. Show us the money. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, quite.
Vandalburger. Andy, I lost my step. Actually, in my mind, my grandfather last night, a bit of wine and bonfire contemplation helped me. Side note, been writing my first Lovecraft noir novel, self-published advice very briefly.
Very briefly.
Very briefly.
Wow, Vandelberg. First, I'm sorry for your loss. And second, briefly, how could I briefly sum all that up? Get it written first.
Angel Dubrai, super excited for this AOS stream. It's a young setting, but it's pretty cool. I think it deserves more attention as it matures and makes the coolest figs. They do make the coolest figs.
Miniatures, freaking amazing.
Yeah, the mini team's got that shit on tap. Give them full credit there. Stephen Lucas, I just ignore the metal wings as easy symbol of divinity as Bride of Cain, hint of true form.
Sure. Doesn't make them good, but sure.
Any explanation for Morathi being half snake?
Yes, we're about to do that. Perfect.
So, let's get into it. We have a lot to cover in a very small amount of time. So, Morathi and Age of Sigmar. So, I am not going to do this as this is when this happened edition. No. I'm just going to tackle her background as kind of a holistic thing.
Chronological order.
And then I will mention when we hit the chronological aspects of we have reached X edition. Mm-hmm. So, the Age of Myth. There is a huge gap between the end times and the Age of Myth. It is an indeterminate amount of time. No one has bothered to pin it down. I doubt they ever will. It could be just thousands of years. It could be billions of years. We have no idea. The only character that was really keeping time during this point was Sigmar, who was dead for a lot of it, and the Slann, who went through a lot of lore shit. And they forgot a significant amount of it because they PTSD and the Slann were like, nope, we don't have therapists. We're just going to not worry about it. And I went, that's a very millennial way to approach that, Slann. But anyway, so at some point during the end times, it is revealed that the first big lore change that we get, huge lore change, is that if you read the end times and you've been here for me and Andy to bitch about the end times, you may have noticed that the whole thing about Ranadandra didn't happen. Yeah. The elven gods did not return to the world and do a bunch of crazy cool shit and then inevitably fall in the final battle against the dark gods, which sucked and we hated it. Yep. And then Age of Sigmar just sort of literally comes out of nowhere and says, no, Ranadandra did happen. It totally happened. The elf gods absolutely made a showing and they fight the dark gods. They throw down with them. And we even start getting details. One of the things that's explored in some the battle tomes, but as well as some short stories, is that Cain fights Khorne. They have a huge, big battle where Khorne fights Cain, fisticuffs, and it's a huge, big, ridiculous thing. Khorne is gets some scars. It's a whole cool thing, but Cain is ultimately weakened because most of the elves have died, and Cain loses. And when Cain loses, he
gets chopped up.
Yes.
Because bits of him go all over the place, apparently. Definitely not 40K.
Yeah. So here's a fun one. So in the original first and earlier edition versions of the story, Cain is hacked into shards.
Yeah.
Which very, very 40K-ish. But later editions will come out and say, nope, Morathi made that up. That's not true. Khorne just kills him and rips out his heart. And Khorne squeezes all the blood out of his heart into his mouth.
6 drops.
Yeah. And then he throws the heart. He just chucks that shit.
It's described more as he squeezes because he's desperate to get the power out of it. And the most he can get out is 6 drops. And in his anger and childish man-boy frustration, he goes, fuck this shit! And lobs it off and goes, I'm done! It's stupid.
Very lore-accurate Khorne, to be fair. Very on brand.
Perfect. Happy with that.
Yeah. So that piece of Cain escapes, essentially. Yeah. Because Khorne threw a hissy fit, which we love. That's very Khorne.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. And a bunch of other elf gods are later revealed in later books. This is actually something that's happening very strongly right now in Age of Sigmar, is that Mathlon's off doing stuff, Mariah Heg's doing stuff, and eventually all of them are tracked down by Slaanesh, killed, and eaten. So Morathi, as we all know, is eaten by Slaanesh. The Age of Sigmar books, actually, funny enough, get a part wrong where they say she's eaten after the world that was falls, when she's actually eaten during it, as those of us who are at the end times know, but, whatever, who cares? It's a minor thing. So, Morathi's eaten.
And it was a long time ago.
Right. Hooray! Morathi got 8. And this is where Slaanesh just sort of wanders into the cosmos after devouring all the elf gods and all the elven souls that it can, and Slaanesh is bloated. Slaanesh has glutted itself on so much death, so much carnage, so much stuff that it's this swollen, gluttonous blueberry girl from Willy Wonka creature that is vulnerable and incapable of really doing much. So Slaanesh, fearing an attack from its other gods, runs away from the realm of Slaanesh and hides somewhere to digest like a big old snake.
Doesn't make sense to leave your realm.
Yeah, but whatever. So Slaanesh goes off somewhere. And while Slaanesh is digesting and the other dark gods are off destroying other realities and yada, 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 at some point, many years later, something stirs in Slaanesh's gullet. Because Slaanesh its guts is just hell, basically, like hell on steroids from Hellraiser with some other cool shit sprinkled in there. But it's an eternal torture realm nonsense. And Morathi is in there being tortured, suffering horribly, to the point that her form is twisted and her soul stuff and her physical reality is she becomes this awful, disgusting thing that, because Slaanesh is very heavily associated. Oh, thank you, Matthew. Is very heavily associated with serpents. Is the reason they give. Morathi takes on a serpentine form because it's Slaanesh's corruption. Which, sure, fine, whatever. But Morathi does something that no one else has ever managed to do, and will never be able to do. Which is that while inside of Slaanesh's guts, Morathi somehow, some way manages to basically cast a spell. And whatever ritual or spell she manages to perform while being horrifically tortured and transfigured and all these horrible things, she unleashes some form of magic that gets Slaanesh to have a bit of an upset tummy. And Slaanesh, in his sort of half-awake digestive state, basically just excises this thing that's bothering it, and it pukes her out. So
so I feel like I have to say something. It's bullshit. It's interesting bullshit, but it's bullshit. Basically, they need to have Morathi, so they say, Slaanesh just six her up because something happens. Do they explain it? No. Do they give good justification for it? No. Do they explain how she can do it and the gods can't do it? No. And all of that is fine. But it's only fine if there is a reason and there's something that can be used or perhaps even used as a part of the ongoing story beats to come afterwards. I.e., she can do something. There's something between her and Slaanesh. And they, in the very first battle tome, do hint at this when they say that possibly she and Slaanesh are in cahoots. And that, in and of itself, makes for an interesting, particularly when you view the fact that her character has always been, there is nothing, literally nothing I can't seduce and get round to my way of thinking. All it takes is time. And that is pretty much what she started doing from her very first visions, because the core raison d'etre of her first character was she was a seer. She saw there was things that had to be done. No one listened to her. So she came up with tools to get what she wanted. And that is her core tool. And that's sort of hinted at. But then everything that follows afterwards doesn't support that. So we are left going, oh, well.
Yeah. What I will say is I would love for them to explore this as a short story. I think it's perfect short story material because, like, Morathi, there is no one in Warhammer Fantasy that knew Slaanesh better than Morathi. No one. The idea that her mastery of sorcery still took her like maybe thousands of years to get in enough of a head. Like, in true Lorebeards fashion, I feel super confident me and Andy could make a story out of this that would be awesome.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Because it's an awesome setup. It's not explained, but one thing is explained, which completely changes all Warhammer lore about the gods. And that is that Slaanesh is just there as someone you can have a chat with.
Yes, the gods are very, very...
The gods are no longer these existential threats from beyond known reality. The chaos gods are no longer almost, cosmic entities of destruction formed from whatever you want to describe them as. For all, a couple of places do say the chaos gods, these great entities from beyond. No. They're individuals you can have a chat with. You can have a fight with. In fact, all of Age of Sigmar gods are this. They are individuals that inhabit an actual place. And you can go over to them and have a chat. And this is the first thing you have to accept with Age of Sigmar when you're coming at it from a Warhammer side. And that is, cosmologically speaking, the gods are now manifest at all times in individual places. Now, they might manifest in a weird way. I doubt Slaanesh looks like, for example, a happy little person sitting there on a toadstool with a pipe. It might be this crazy entity, but it's still nonetheless something you can go find, hunt down, and do things to, cast spells on, fuck about with, which is so different to what we had before in Warhammer Fantasy Battle that it takes quite a paradigm shift for you to accept it. But once you accept that, it creates a bunch of new stories, because now it's a story of mythic proportions about gods and the stories of each of their almost anthropomorphic issues. They are just normal folks in gigantic form, who all have their own hopes, dreams, wants, and fears. So removed from Warhammer, but it's really worth spending just a bit of extra time for you to go, Slaanesh isn't 40k Slaanesh or Warhammer Fantasy Battle Slaanesh. Slaanesh is someone you can go over and say, you fancy a drink?
Yeah, the gods are much more, they're characters.
Yeah, they're, in many respects, they're much smaller. Small gods.
They are meant to be interacted with and punched, to put it bluntly. But so anyway, so Morathi is spit out, and Morathi basically turns into this like hurling comet meteor thing, which happens to a lot of the characters that enter AOS. And she eventually basically goes through what we know as the void, and which is just space, and she slams into Ulgu, the realm of shadow. And Morathi lands in one of the oceans of shadow, where she could have and very possibly should have just immediately died, but because she's such a powerful sorceress, she's able to adapt to the realm of shadow very quickly, and she makes a little bubble for herself, and she survives the impact, she survives the ocean, she makes her way into the realm of shadow. Now,
tiny interjection, totally makes sense from a previous character. She was, after all, the first sorceress in the world, and she has the rule first sorceress in the first edition of Age of Sigmar as well, and it 100% fits. She has arrived in a realm that uses magic she understands. Now, she doesn't understand it in its current form, but it's still magic she understands. When she gets down there, inherently, this is her playground, and there's fuck all anyone can do. She's effectively a god anyway, as you find out when she meets Malarian, and Malarian goes, yeah, you're not as powerful as me, but holy shit, you'll be handy in making my next city.
Yeah, so the thing that's very cool about Morathi is, like Andy said, there's some other books that delve a little bit more into this. Morathi settles into Ulgu way faster than Malarian does. Malarian, this is one of the few times we actually get like a good look at him, of that when he wakes up within Ulgu, he doesn't have a physical body. He's literally just made of shadow magic. And it takes a ridiculous amount of effort for him to even manifest a body that can like move around and interact with things. And he wanders the realm, and when he finds Morathi, she has already established a court of shadow demons and other native entities to Ulgu, which are no elves. There are no elves yet at this point.
I really like the small bit where it's it doesn't just say that she'd managed to summon them. She seduced some of the demons for their power and has taken it from them. It's a nice little detail, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is Morathi. Yeah,
and good to job. Be fair, when they say shadow demons, they're not like, don't think chaos demons. They're like etheric entities.
Etheric entities of Ulgu.
Yeah, and Morathi's got it on lock. So even though Malarian is literally the god of shadow, he's the realm of Ulgu embodied, she's already got him on a one-up. Yeah. And when they meet, we don't get the exact conversation, but it's noted that it's not a joyous reuniting. It's a bit of an awkward one, which, to be fair, they ended on some pretty ugly terms during the end times. But ultimately, they both put it aside and are like, okay, we have found each other. We found someone that knows, I know. We'll work together and figure out what the fuck's going on.
Where's the elves?
Yeah, where are the elves? Which, fine, cool. Yeah. So the two of them basically wander around for a bit, and eventually they bump into Sigmar, because Sigmar is doing a great exodus around the realms where he's like looking for all the other gods and yada yada. So Sigmar bumps into them, and they go, "Oh hey, look, Sigmar!" And he's like, "Oh hey, I know you two, kinda." He's implied to know them better than he should, even though he shouldn't know them at all. which, hey, could potentially open the door that maybe Morathi did meet Sigmar. Maybe
I think so. There's a story there.
If that's true, that would explain why their meeting goes off as well as it does. Because Sigmar quite literally goes, "Oh my god, it's Morathi, and who's that?" And she's like, "Oh, it's Malarian." And he goes, "Oh my god, he looks really different." But like him and Morathi are instantly like that Spider-Man meme. And which is cool. Once again, they don't explain the story, but there's a story there. So Sigmar says, "Hey, I found some elves. There's not a lot of them, but I found a few of them." They go, "Oh shit, cool elves." And he takes them back to his ear where they meet the elves, but they're super few, way less than there should be. When Sigmar goes, "Look, there's the dwarfs and there's the humans and the greenskins."
There's the elves.
The elves go, "Why are there like so few of us, but there's like a shitload of you guys? Shouldn't there be tons of elves? Like, where the fuck are all the elves?" And it's a bit of a mystery for a bit. And then they bump into Tyrion and Teclis.
I mean, is it?
Yeah. They figured out relatively quick. But so Tyrion and Teclis, they all meet up, and once again, awkward meeting, ancient enemies bumping into each other. But once again, they're all like, "Ooh, there's not a lot of elves, so maybe we should work together." And Sigmar goes, "Hey, I'm making a cool big pantheon. We should all be on the same team."
It's also worth noting that if we do go with the end times, that Malarian by this point is pretty much their king. So they should be, regardless of the potential equal power, in the same way that back in the Warhammer world, they all had relatively equal power. They're all mortals. And here, they're all immortal gods. And if they're going by any of the old stuff, regardless of any potential historic enmity, he, at the end, became king. And yeah, they had a few issues in the end times too, but let's just not talk about that.
So there is an important aspect that happens with Morathi here, which Morathi has a very, very, very key ability in this meeting between Tyrion, Teclis, Malarian, and her, which is that Malarian and Tyrion have a problem, which is that as the key gods of light and shadow, respectively, they literally cannot enter each other's realms. So Malarian cannot go to the realm of light. Tyrion cannot go to the realm of shadow.
It's a little bit like your liver trying to enter your heart. They're different things.
Yeah. But Morathi can bridge that gap. Teclis, it's a little bit unclear. I believe he can go to Olgu, but it's not super clear whether or not he can. Because he's a full-on god of light as well, so he might not be able to go to Olgu.
I mean, he shouldn't be able to, but stories.
Yeah, I haven't seen him ever go to Olgu, but it's not like directly stated, so I'm not 100% sure on that one. But one of the things that's interesting here is that Morathi, it is said, does not enjoy this because the thing about Tyrion and Teclis is that they don't want to interact with her. They don't trust her. And the big thing is that Teclis and Tyrion believe that Morathi has been twisted enough by Slaanesh, or maybe she's an agent of Slaanesh. Like they basically, Tyrion and Teclis go, the only way she could have got out of Slaanesh's guts is if she made a deal with him. So fuck her. We're not working with her. We're not going to talk to her. We're not going to hang out with her. The only gods that will willingly interact with her really are Sigmar, Malarian, and Nagash. They're the only three gods that will really tolerate her presence. The rest of them are like, ugh. Like Alariel won't interact with her. Tyrion and Teclis won't interact with her. They stay away from her because they think she's corrupted. And they are also like, she's mean and she's duplicitous and I don't trust her. Which, fair, whatever. So the council...
Malarian.
Yeah, the council, the Pantheon of Order, as they're called, hangs out for a bit. They do a pretty good job dominating the realms, and later editions will actually do some cool stuff with this and point out that they're genuinely dominating it. So they're doing a lot of colonizer type shit that causes problems later in the setting, which makes things more interesting, but we don't have time for that. And amidst this discussion, two big things go down. The first is that Morathi attempts to say, hey, Tyrion and Teclis are twin gods of Hysh. Why don't you and I, son, be twin gods of Olgu? And he goes, no, I'm not doing that. Olgu is mine. All of the 13 domains of Olgu are mine and mine alone. And she's like, okay, well, fuck you too, son. And they have a bit of a back and forth. And finally he relents and says, okay, tell you what, Mom, I'm going to give you the very dead center of Olgu, which is like suck. It's like Florida. It's terrible. Like no one wants to go there. It is the deepest pit of Olgu where horrible, horrible things are. And it's very implied that he gives it to her as like a fuck you. of like
there's one step between that though, which is the bit when she gets kicked out or she walks out of the Pantheon. And she has
happened.
That happens before, and it's that happens before. Because I literally just read it. That's the only reason I know. It happens before, and because of that, Malarian goes, "Well, you're not getting anything. Oh, actually, I'll give you this really shithole bit
that's right.
of Ulgu. The really shithole bit, just almost as a fuck you. You're not useless because you're not of any use because the other gods in the Pantheon, not only did they not trust her, she wasn't a god." And this is said in a couple of places. And whenever decisions were made, she was left out of them. She wasn't allowed to make the impact that she felt that she should be able to have. She, by this point, is of a power that's almost ridiculous anyway, but not divine as they divine such matters, meaning that she gets sidelined, and then when she eventually attempts to manipulate Nagash goes fuck off in the earliest one, or alternatively, in the later books, it's just simply, she looks at it and goes, fuck you all, you're dicks, I hate you all, you're not willing to listen to good reason, and she hikes it out and ends up having a discussion with her son.
Yeah, something that I find really interesting about this part that's very true and 100% what Andy said is that when Morathi meets the gods of Age of Sigmar, she very quickly deduces that what a god is not what it used to be. It's a genuine realization of that not all of them are actually even truly the gods they claim to be, where basically the original gods of Age of Sigmar are individuals that were very powerfully resonant with the realm they were the god of, to the point where they could control and shape in their beings of cosmic power.
I'll add one extra detail to that as well. When you're actually discussing the level of power they have, you have to consider what her and Malarian have done up to this point. So beyond the Pantheon bit, when they first met, and they're all the way back in Ulgu, and they're having their chin wags about, do you remember when, and all the rest of it, and they decide that they will basically create a home, and they form up Druchi Roth, which is basically not Nagaroth, honest. It's just Druchi with Roth added. Yeah, so they do it. They do it together, and they build the Great Citadel. So this is before Sigmar comes along and has a chat. They build this enormous, huge citadel together. He is in this weird shadowy place. She has absolute mastery over magics, and the pair of them build it as one. And I think that's what you've got to consider when it then moves on to the next step, when she moves into the Pantheon, and she's in the Pantheon as one of them, and they're all like, you're not the same as us. Now, this Pantheon doesn't just include gods, it includes like big beastie things and all manner of other big powerful entities. But she's the one that everyone singles out as not being the most powerful one, even though Malarian couldn't do what needed to be done without her. And then she's just left going, you are a bunch of elitist fuckers. This giant glass ceiling is sitting over my head that doesn't really exist, while simultaneously it matters. So I want what you have, so fuck you all.
Yeah, it's Malarian literally physically could not do the stuff he wanted to do without Morathi because he can't manifest physically. He needs his mother. Morathi's the one that figures out how to earn the love and the servitude of the shadow demons, who are the most powerful natives that we're aware of to Ulgu. It's Morathi who forms the first court. It's Morathi who helps Malarian be able to manifest a more permanent, solid form.
Yeah.
And then the second that they get up with Sigmar and the other guys, Malarian just tosses his mother to the side, which is very on brand for him, and kicks her down. Of that, I don't need your help anymore, Mom. I've got Sigmar. I don't need you.
The whole thing is just, it's quite a fascinating setup, but it feels very much like the sort of writing you got at the end of Warhammer 8th edition. And it does marry into many of the similar themes where Morathi's not being listened to by anyone, often other than her own son. And her son is someone that she can control quite easily, but also he pulls a strop sometimes. So it all fits in quite well.
Yeah. So then we get the infamous story bit with Nagash, where... like Andy said, I do genuinely believe that this is something that they've kind of been like, we're just not going to use that anymore. That in the original story, Morathi, they were kind of looking for an excuse of how to show off Morathi's new mini, is basically the way it's kind of played, where Morathi is in the council and Malarian's kind of tossed her, is like not doing what she wants, and she wants to have influence over what the gods are deciding. And she tries to cozy up to Nagash. And she basically attempts to befriend him, seduce him and everything. And Nagash, rather amusedly, goes along very much with what me and Andy have talked about with Nagash, if you've ever watched the Nagash thing, where Nagash is probably one of the biggest fucking misogynists Warhammer has ever produced. And he just goes, get the fuck away from me. And it's key that Nagash doesn't just rebuke her in the sense of like, no, Nagash borderline attacks her.
He does. And a core component of her character, which had been sort of discussed earlier, gets shown here in stark. And that's that she is a character of two forms. She's got the giant snake form that I mentioned in the
which is her true form.
Which is her true form. And she's got this other form, which is her basically going back to what she was in Warhammer all the way back in the day, her perfect form. And that is almost the illusion that she spins to sit in front of her. And that's how she presents to everyone, because that's how she likes to think of herself. And when Nagash attacks, her true form is revealed. And in this description of it, she leaves in embarrassment and horror at being outed for who she actually is. And it's so against almost all of the character traits we've had from Morathi so far, where she is exceedingly in control and doesn't make these sort of mistakes, that you're almost left going, why did you do this? And it's no great surprise they overwrote it. Personally, I think that, again, it's a story that needs to be told better rather than retconned, because Nagash has a very strong character, but so does she. But she is outed, and apparently in embarrassment, she leaves the pantheon of gods, never to return. Later on, that motivation's changed entirely, and the reason that she leaves the pantheon of gods is because they're dicks, and she doesn't like them. Because of the way they treat her.
I think there is very much something that could. I think her and Nagash having an altercation during the Age of Myth where he does attack her, I think that should be kept.
Oh yeah,
because it's cool. it's a very cool moment of the story, because it's not a little attack. Like Nagash unleashes, if I recall correctly, I think he unleashes the power of the book. He literally flips open everything, just boom, and she shrugs it off. It causes her to show off that form, but it doesn't strike her down. She gets hit with the full wrath of a god and just like bleh. But I do very much prefer the version of the story where she leaves in fury because the gods are just treating her to be frank, they're treating her like shit.
Yeah. And I think that those two stories easily conflate. And by that, I mean, you've got an altercation with Nagash, which then turns into her effectively making a petition of, this is not how things should be, to which they go, yeah, well, you're not a god, so fuck you. And her going, well, fuck you all then. I don't need you and you don't need me. Clearly, and then leaving, and that actually leaves them in a weaker place, because she's something that most of them simply aren't, and that is an extraordinarily capable physical spellcaster. She's not someone who's attuned to one of the realms and can't really go beyond the thinking of that realm. She's not, in many respects, taken up by the divinity of her position and the greater the greater benefits and negatives that brings. She's a fully material creature, allowing her to do things that the others can't at a level of power that no other entity out there can even come close to, because she is what she is, the first sorceress, and she's older than everybody else there by some significant measure. Thousands of years more experience than pretty much all of them. They, in turn, don't trust her because of the fact that, well, she lay in the belly of Slaanesh for a very long time. Not the most trustworthy of places to be. But it does speak to the core story of what Morathi always was, which is the Cassandra complex. She is somebody, okay, who knows a certain level of truth and is incapable of impressing it upon others, and the others always retaliate against it. And I like that, but the writers have forgotten it throughout this entire section. They've forgotten she's a seer. They've forgotten she's an oracle. They've forgotten she can see the future, and that her entire existence is almost ruined by the fact she can see the future. And all they really talk about is the fact that she's with Malarian, and for one reason or another leaves.
Yeah, there's a very sudden moment where they'll remember she can do that, but we'll get to that. So anyway, so she leaves. Malarian gives her the Umbral Veil, and there she finds some of the surviving elves who were discovered in Azir but started to travel out to the other realms. And this particular group of elves, for whatever reason, are worshiping Cain. There is very little explanation for how these elves even know about Cain.
There's not very little. There's none.
Yeah, because if you go read the Lumineth and the Ideneth lore, in that, like, Teclis literally has to teach many of the elves, like, who the old gods were. And it maybe, it could very well be that while they were living in Azirheim, maybe they're having, like, discussions with Sigmar and stuff, and Sigmar's, like, trying to teach them what he knows, and they latched onto the concept of Cain, or it awakens some memory, because the original elves, the ones that don't come later, but the ones that were there at the start of Age of Sigmar, there were vanishingly few of them, and where exactly they came from is some of them came from essentially Athel Loren, and others came from, like, very weird little scrap pockets that Slaanesh missed, and then they pop back up in AOS. But regardless, there's a group worshiping Cain, and Morathi goes, Cain. I know Cain. I fucked Cain. He was cool. He was all right.
It's even further than that. I mean, we know from the previous story of Morathi, she made the cult of Cain. She made it. This is her cult. And she arrives there, sees a bunch of people following her cult, and makes arguably the biggest mistake of her life and the life that's about to come. And she says, I know this, we'll stick with it.
Yep.
And she continues to lead them. Now, we know the real reason why she stuck with it is because they needed to justify those minis. And those minis are all Cain worshippers in various stripes, and they just wanted to use the same miniatures that they'd used back in Warhammer Fantasy, so shut up already. But a proper Morathi would have come in and just made a new cult, because that's what she does and has done multiple times before, and she'd have put herself at the heart of it. And she'd have gone, you who are pretty much misguided and lost in the ways of Cain, let me show you the truth. And she would have shown them the truth, but she doesn't. So it's key that we get in mind that the clever choice she doesn't take. She instead takes the cult that I know and love and created. Let's rebuild that using you.
Yeah. So she becomes the High Oracle of Cain. And she basically teaches them everything that she knows about Cain, which, to be fair, is literally everything there is to know about Cain. And while doing that, she goes, I guess I can hunt around, maybe I can find some artifacts. Now, it's worth noting, later lore delves into this more, of that Morathi at this point, from her perspective, knows, not suspects, but knows the elf gods are dead.
Yep.
Completely. They are dead. D-E-A-D, dead, never coming back, period.
And there's a lovely little split here between the editions where the initial one goes, and there's bits of Cain out there which can be collected and stuff, and it turns into, no. That was all lies. Morathi was just lying.
Yeah. So, and the later books go, okay, so she's lying, and the reason she's lying is that, like, to make her cult more powerful, she tells them, you know what? I think there's a shard of Cain over on that yonder hill. Why don't y'all go conquer that and build a city there? And they go, okay. And they run over there and do all that. But eventually, as she is in charge of this cult and she's seeking out pieces of Cain, she has a dream where she senses something. And she follows this heartbeat in her dream, and she discovers the god beast Charybdar. Now, God Beasts, is a very quick TLDR, they are cosmic, big, or awful monsters. And most of them are like the father or mother of a species. So, like, if you have a dragon, you have a father of dragons. That's a God Beast. If you have a giant, you have a behemoth, who is the god beast of the giants, who is the very first giant. Yada, yada. Or
It's
Behemoth.
also worth
Sorry, not
noting that
Behemoth, Behemoth.
in the first edition, there's god beasts in the Pantheon as well.
Yes, there are.
They're specifically mentioned, but I think in the later ones they don't mention that at all. They just say there's the Pantheon and then they move on. At least in the books I read.
The later books, it's the Pantheon and like allies. Like Dracothian is not on the Pantheon, but he's an ally of the Pantheon.
Yeah. Where in the first edition, it was just they're all there doing shit.
Yeah, and most god beasts, the reason they're called that is they are basically strong enough that they can fight a god. Like they can go toe to toe with a god, and it's not, you don't know who's going to win. They are civilization ender type fights. So she finds Charybdar, and Charybdar is the father, or I believe he's male in the story. Charybdar is the father of the Charybdi. They're the Charybdises. So if you've seen a Charybdis mini, he's that, but like Godzilla-sized and significantly older and more intelligent. He is the originator of their species. And Morathi finds out that in his huge cavern of goodies, he has the Heart of Cain, and it's his most prized possession. And the big reason for this is that one of the things in Age of Sigmar that is a bit off and on, but is a core tenet that often is reinforced, is that the gods of Age of Sigmar require worship in order to be strong, in order to exist. The more worshippers they have and the better state their worshippers are in, the bigger and badder they are. And in the case of Cain, because people were worshiping Cain, this little cult Morathi had created, the Heart of Cain was receiving that worship and was emanating power.
Yeah, and in some regards, it's a nice step and nice detail. If they'd thought it through, they might have flipped it a little bit, and they could have used the heart. They could have easily flipped it a bit and said that because of the heart, she uses the cult. But instead, she builds the cult first. The cult sort of wakes up the heart. She becomes aware of said heart, chases it down, and ends up, after having somewhat of a scrap, which I'm sure you're going to detail.
Yes. So Charybdar, Morathi once again tries the seduction trick. And against Charybdar, it actually works at first. Like initially, she does successfully seduce the father of god beasts. Now, it's worth keeping in mind for anyone watching that, like, even though we love Monster Fuckers Anonymous, that seduce is a word that can carry a lot of different connotations. It's not necessarily that Morathi is like shaking her hips and trying to get the god beast horny. Like, it can mean a lot of different things.
It also means potentially that she did.
But it also, I'm just, throwing that out there. But in any event, it works until she tries to take the heart from him.
Yeah.
And when she tries to take the heart, he basically has like a Bilbo Baggins mode of, and he gets pissed and attacks her. And to Morathi's credit, she throws down with a fucking god beast, despite not being a god, and she wins. She beats fucking Charybdar, which if she's not a god, she should have lost that fight.
Yeah, exactly.
But she's fucking Morathi. And it is a hell of a fight. It's a big, ugly fight that lasts for a good bit, but she ultimately defeats him, takes the heart, and goes back to the Umbral Vale. And this is where her stuff really kicks off. Of that, she has Cain's heart, and she realizes that the people worshiping it is causing it to radiate power that then she takes. Now, one of the things that's actually very funny between early AOS and later AOS is that, especially around second edition, Games Workshop had a very, very strong idea of the elf gods are dead and they will never come back. Stop asking for it. They're not coming back. And they go, Cain, he's super dead. No matter what happens, he's dead forever. Later editions will say, oh, no, that's not actually true. They can come back. The reason Cain hasn't come back is that Morathi is stealing all of the power that would resurrect him from his followers because she has the heart. She's absorbing it. But if she were to ever lose the heart and it was just like off on its own, then Cain would remanifest. But because as long as she has it, that's not going to happen. To basically give our why is he not back yet?
Yeah, it's an interesting setup, and it's one that the second you look at it for what it is, makes you realize that Morathi is just digging her own grave, and she knows it, and it's all a bit weird because the second that she became aware that this was the case, she should have just converted them to worshipping her. That's what should have happened. They should have. It's the source of power and how the new Age of Sigmar works. And she would have very quickly realized, and she would have moved from weaning herself off of one power source to getting another power source. But no, she doesn't do that. Instead, she just settles in, accepting this particular setup, and in this dark corner of the realm of Ulgu, slowly but surely gathers power.
Yeah, and she, to her credit, is doing very well for herself, and despite the fact that there's not a lot of elves at this point, like the little cult of Cain is doing okay. And this is the last little segment we'll do before we do more super chat stuff, is the end of the Age of Myth, or leading into the end, where something changes, where Tyrion, Teclis, and Malarian, all over on the Council of the Gods, come to a universal decision that, okay, you know what? We know Slaanesh has all the souls. So what if we capture Slaanesh? Would that then allow us? I bet we could do something then. But how the fuck do we catch Slaanesh? And Malarian goes, maybe we should talk to my mom. Because my mom knows Slaanesh better than anyone. And so literally they have to go and beg Morathi to help them. And say, hey, we know we're really mean to you and we treated you like you were a literally lesser being than us. And all that jazz, and said you were corrupt and all that shit. But maybe you'd consider helping us catch Slaanesh. And she goes, okay, but on one condition.
Let's add one detail there.
Yeah,
it's Teclis, not Malarian.
It's technically Malarian.
It's Teclis.
It's such a shithead.
It's Teclis. Teclis is the one who puts two and two together and goes, wait a minute, let's be logical here. Morathi is the one who has been through all of this. I'm pretty convinced she must have come from there. And they're like, what the fuck? Don't be stupid. And he's like, no, seriously. Given what happened with the gash, all the rest of it, she's come from there. She's got a story to tell. We should convince her to tell that story. So they go to her and effectively try to persuade her to join. And she, as is often the case with Morathi, does so, but only if they make a deal.
Yes. So she strikes a deal with the Elven Gods where if they capture Slaanesh and start ripping the souls out of him, she gets her fair share. So they each get a quarter of the souls that are pulled out. And this leads to the capture of Slaanesh, where Morathi basically helps set up. She really leads the charge.
One other detail worth adding in this little part as well, because it's quite an important one for understanding her character. She's good to her word in that she opens up for the first time since the vomiting.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Slaanesh. And she then shares with the three other elf gods that she was down there and the horror that she went through, that she was sitting inside Slaanesh being tortured for countless millennia, and that she, through sheer willpower alone, fought her way out until eventually getting vomited forth, and then in turn basically explained how she did it and how you could get out and how you could reclaim souls that are still in there, to which they all went, what, the elves are still down there? They're definitely down there. To which she said, kinda. They're not the same as they were before. Many of them are just lost souls that are elf souls, but they're still elf souls, and Slaanesh is dining on them again and again. But whatever you take out won't be the same. They're going to change. You're going to need to almost have to cleanse them on the way out, but they're definitely down there. She basically gives them all the tools that they need to create what is arguably one of the biggest, most extraordinary plans ever, which is to extract half-eaten soul stuff from a chaos god and hopefully turn it into something pure, something new to repopulate the elves inside the Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, one of the things that's worth adding is that this is a story that goddamn should be written down somewhere, because it's such a moment of you seeing them come to Morathi and having to convince her to basically share the most traumatic of traumatic ideas, and her actually being vulnerable with them. And this note of that, like Andy said, the elf gods, they didn't know where the elves were, and most of them had assumed that Slaanesh had digested them all. Well, the thing that Morathi reveals that's so key, and I actually love this about Slaanesh, is that Slaanesh is so greedy, and this leads to Slaanesh's downfall. That's going to happen in a little bit. Is that Slaanesh refused to digest the elven souls? Slaanesh would basically half digest them and then regurgitate them to eat them again, and just kept doing it over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, elf souls are clearly different, and we've discussed this in another soul, that elf souls are not like other souls. This whole section, though, it surprisingly annoyed me, and it annoyed me for exactly the reason that Ryan is suggesting there. I'm going to quote it because it annoyed me so much. Let me just quickly find it. Here we go. The full tale, because they come up with a gigantic plan to effectively capture Slaanesh using all of the powers of Hysh and Ulgu wrapped together to capture a god. How fucking cool is that? So how do they describe it? The full tale of the mystical battles that followed is long and harrowing. But the end result was this.
Use your imagination.
They used themselves as bait. That's in the elven gods, Morathi, and so on. And then, a big cabal of sorcerers to manage to capture Slaanesh. What the fuck? No! What the fuck? Everything else is given like a couple of paragraphs of, ooh, these cool things happen. What's it say here? Oh, it's a really long tale, but it's too complicated for us to even attempt telling, and we don't know how to do it, so we're not going to bother.
Yeah, it's basically like that whole thing from the Star Wars sequels where she's like, a tale for another time. Just don't tell it.
It's bad. And the whole thing is built up to so much because they have paragraphs and paragraphs of, and this happens. And then Morathi opens her heart and they go, ooh, we're going to have to do all of these things. And then they do it. And we're not going to tell you how, but it was epic.
Yeah, so I will give what details have been added in other sources, which is not a lot, but it basically boils down to this, of that Morathi discusses with the other gods, and they come up with a plan to basically unleash a very powerful ritual to project their power into the void, which is this great expanse of crazy bullshit that's outer space, but there's like living constellations and other weird shit going on there. And to the point where it's crossing dimensions. So we're not talking about like a little spell that sends out, like they're literally projecting across dimensions because chaos does not exist in this realm yet. It's not there. There's Skaven, but there's no Khorne / any other stuff.
They're not strictly chaos.
They're not strictly full on team chaos yet. They're kind of doing their own thing. And there are beastmen, but the beastmen don't worship chaos yet. This is a non-chaos reality. And so the elf gods unleash this, and funny enough, they do this without consulting the other gods, which will cause problems later. They project this huge, power wave to basically throw their scent out everywhere they could possibly think to do it. And Slaanesh catches it. And so Slaanesh, this big, horrible, gluttonous god there's this very cool art of Slaanesh's capture where it's like this big thing with tentacles and crab claws and all this other stuff made out of like stars and all this crazy shit. But Slaanesh basically comes crawling. They open up enough of a gateway that Slaanesh comes crawling into reality as this horrible thing. And it is a great battle that is once again very heavily expedited. They don't go into details, which fucking sucks. But it's a huge fight between the four Morathi's not a god yet, but Tyrion, Teclis, Balerion, Morathi, and what sorceress elves they are able to conjure together from just the elves that lived in Azir that could be convinced to join them. And so they've got this big all these sorcerers in this realm called Ulgish, which is halfway between Ulgu and Ulgu and Ish, which is a hidden realm. It's known as the Hidden Gloaming. And it's a realm of paradox because it's where light meets shadow. And it's also the only place that's connected to both realms where Tyrion, Teclis, and Malarian can actually meet. And so they have this big fight with Slaanesh. And while the fight is going, there are, I believe, 100. It's either 99 or 100. There's 100 of these great pillars that are basically elven waystones from Warhammer Fantasy. And
all floating around.
Yeah, and Teclis uses his light, and Morathi uses her shadow magic to cast these great chains that wrap around a part of Slaanesh's body. and they very slowly but carefully wrap him in all these chains while Tyrion and Malarian are like full on fighting him. And by the end of it, Slaanesh is wrapped up and ensnared in 99 or 100 chains of paradox. And they are literally paradoxes, where each chain is a concept woven into a physical form that represents a paradoxical idea. And which is a cool idea. They get more into it in a book we don't have time to discuss, which is part of the Broken Realms saga that has to do with Archaon, but we don't have time for it. So Slaanesh is captured, and they go, "Woo! Yay! Good job, us!" And they start experimenting with the ripping out souls things, and it works. It's a very elaborate process, but it does work. And once again, in the interest of time, we're going to skip a lot of this, but we'll say that what Morathi does with her souls is that, because each of the gods does something different. Morathi takes the soul she gets, and she goes back to Hagnar, her fortress.
That's her hometown, her fortress, in that quiet little corner of Olgu.
And she does something really fucking cool that I really like, which is that with all of her knowledge of Cain, the heart of Cain, she creates Mathkorion, the mother cauldron.
Yeah, Mathkor. So this is super fun because whilst the other gods are effectively taking these souls and bringing them into their realms and reincarnating them as elves. We've got elves. Yay! We've got elves coming back. Look, there's elves coming back into the Shadow Realm. She's bringing them into this gigantic soul cauldron, and she uses this cauldron to bring out her new version of elves. And she brings throughout quite a number. Now, those of you out there might go, wait a minute. People coming out of a cauldron. Isn't this just like ancient Welsh myths with the black cauldron? And would that involve undead and weird soulless creatures? To a degree, yes, because clearly whoever had written this part when I watched Black Cauldron as a kid, and I'm just going to recreate it here. So she spins out her new versions of the elves, but for some unknown reason, and let's just say it's because of the way that she's siphoned in these ones, she manages to get an awful lot of the broken shit, whilst they're getting elevated light elves kicking around over there.
So there is an explanation for that.
Oh, good. I'd like to hear this one.
Okay, so one is that it is revealed that initially she's given some of the worst ones in the initial part of the deal, which leads. So they deliberately screw Morathi on this. So remember this, because she's going to do something about it. But she initially gets screwed with she is given literally the most twisted, broken down, digested, depraved souls. Poor Gurgi. And Morathi, now, making elven souls back into their form is very, very hard. And each of them have their own way of doing it, to the point where Tyrion Teclis's initial recreation of the elves fails.
It fucked up completely.
Yeah, they try to recreate the high elves, they fuck up, and they create the Aina Deacon on accident. But Morathi doesn't fuck up, even though she's given the worst souls. But what she does is she puts the souls into the cauldron, and she infuses them with a lot of shadow magic, and she feeds them drops of her own blood. According to some myths, she even squeezes very occasionally blood out of the heart of Cain. So she gives them just that little snippet of divinity, and it's enough that sometimes when the souls are relatively okay, she's able to produce normal witch elves, essentially, normal elves. But many of them are so broken that she infuses them that they can't become normal elves. They're too broken. So Morathi figures out a way to fix it, which is that by giving her own essence, they become either Melusai or Kinnerai. And Melusai they're Gorgon elves, so they're elves that are serpentine. They're huge. They're much bigger than regular elves, but they have the lower bodies of serpents and then upper bodies of an elf. And the Kinnerai are part elf, part harpy, where they've got like the big harpy wings.
Pretty harpies.
Yes, they're sexy harpies. That's exactly
sexy harpies. That's all they are. Sexy harpies.
And what's interesting is one of the things that will come up later, and I actually like this for Morathi, is that the ones that Morathi infused with her own blood are utterly, deeply, completely loyal to her. Like even in 4th edition, where we have the rising conflict of people finding out that she's been lying about Cain, all the Melusai and the Kinnerai don't give a fuck. They know the truth. Morathi has told them the truth, and they don't care. They are utterly loyal to their mother.
Male ones. There's also the broken men.
Yes,
don't forget your broken men.
Yeah, so Morathi does create male elves so that they can repopulate. Morathi does not treat them well. The absolute worst souls that can still take a physical form, Morathi shapes to be men. So only the weakest souls are allowed to be men. And they are they're a class called like the Kellam.
Ew, man!
Yeah,
actually,
no,
it's not far from that.
The Lethanim.
Yeah. So basically, these are the Cauldron Born. So those souls that she can't shape into something useful, she shapes into effectively a slave male species that supports the elves.
Yep, they're the lowest caste.
The lowest caste, and they are made of the broken shards of souls that she's managed to cobble together into something. And this is where you then must note two other things before we move into our super chats. Number one, Morathi has managed to score at least, and we'll move on to the at least in a moment, a quarter of all the elf souls that are coming. They might not be the best quality, but a quarter are coming her way. An equal amount to what Malarian has to populate his entire realm, she has in her tiny pocket of the realm. So numbers alone, she is on equal par with all of the other elves by some significant measure. Plus, she is also beginning to repopulate using the more normal methods for elves to procreate. So we have that as a starting point. Plus, she also cheats them and takes more than she was ever allotted because she understands exactly how the whole process of Slaanesh, regurgitation, soul, she was the one who basically set it all up. They may have cheated her, but in turn she cheats them, and she takes a higher proportion of the souls than the other three ever expected that she would, putting her in a far, far stronger place than any of them realize. And they won't be aware of that potentially at all, depending on the story.
They eventually figure it out, but way too late.
Much later.
Yeah, because it does have consequences.
Exactly. So what we have here is Morathi, again, just so that we can culminate all of this into a nice little wrap-up. She's approached by the other gods. She has information that's not just essential to trapping Slaanesh, that without it, they can't do it. She provides them with all of the intelligence that they need, and further, they can't do it without her to continue the sorceress aspect of it. The magic that she can bring to bear, as it's marked in more than one version of this, is essential to trapping Slaanesh. She is the core component of them all getting together. Effectively, without her, it doesn't happen. She makes it happen. They cheat her, but in turn, she cheats them. It comes out 50-50 in the end. They cheat her by giving her the dross. She cheats them by taking far more of it than they ever realized was going to get spewed out of Slaanesh. And she and the whole Slaanesh setup understands it in a way that none of the others do. She provided all of the intelligence that they worked upon, including the intelligence she didn't provide that she used to siphon off more. Oh, there we go.
Yep. And to the point, the lore does reinforce that she actually has an overpopulation problem, which is why she has to send the daughters of Cain outward to like go, and they start having set up cities, and they live in the cities of men as gladiators, and priests, and all this other stuff. They have to go out. There's too many of them. There's too many elves.
Because she has so much of the elven soul stuff getting poured out of Slaanesh, and the rest of them have got entire realms to populate by themselves with the relatively meager numbers. She has a tiny realm to populate, happens in no time at all, and then they start emigrating outwards.
Yep. All right, Matthew, thank you again for the gift membership.
Appreciate it.
Friend or Freighter, and apologies in advance, I'm going to fly through these. Intrepid Seekers of Lords, you venture into Olgu Fall for the Serpentine Glamours of the Hag. Why waste your time on a thief? Venture the tenebrous path, seek out Mordekar and the Dark Master. Don't fall for that! Don't fall for that! He calls himself the Dark Master. Don't go that way.
That's never a good sign. No. Let me just suggest that.
Skylar Martin Sigmar. Oh my god, it's my ex, and who's that? Malarian. I don't know.
Malarian.
Oh, it's my ex's kid. Hey, what's up, man? Antonio Ranza. Ciao Ragazzi Poros. Oh gosh.
I'm enjoying this.
Prossimo video, please. Laukavai of Evangori Dynasty, please Tulane. There is a Tulane video coming soon. It's something that I'm going to be putting on our calendar. In the intro, I will do in Italian. I remember that promise. Don't worry, it'll be awful for everyone involved. I will not have an Italian help me. I will not have an Italian help me. I will only use Google Translate, and whatever happens, happens. Claw, for AOS tubers having to get, yes, 2+ Tough is very high on my list. He's actually number 1 on my list. Time Pirate, I can't remember when I read it, but I always like the idea that instead of the problem being a low population of elves, the new elf god saw these elves and said, you are not true elves, we have to find the real ones. That is how some of them feel about it. But it's a mixture of both. Some, I believe Tyrion and Teclis are more on the these are not good enough, and Malern and Morathi are more on the there is not enough level of the scales.
Different versions.
Skylar Martin, incredible cosmic power. Leaving space. Yeah. JP Riker, love you both. Dodge the K, most feminist friendly faction. They're the most.
I'm gonna hard no on this because feminists support men and this faction doesn't. Feminists believe that by supporting all sides and allowing all sides to have equality, you have a good outcome. This faction doesn't. It's an anti-feminist.
Yeah, this is the most misandrist of faction,
or 100% misandrist.
Yeah, or girl boss, as you may prefer. Faction. Yes, they are.
Yeah, it's a misandrist setup completely.
Stephen Lucas, old ones intend to AOS as a battlefield to kill chaos, change the rules to make gods physical, still Stormcast on Nurgle and Realm of Chaos and still yes. Yeah. When Nurgle shows up, they very much portray him as he's an incomprehensible cosmic entity that then proceeds to get basically punched by godlight. So it's a bit of a both thing. It's messy.
I think, though, the central point that the old ones set up, if you wish to view it this way, Age of Sigmar to be a place where the Chaos Gods can die, is an accurate description of everything that we have so far. Now, might it change with later editions if they do something different? Sure. But as it currently stands, it's a good answer to the situation as it stands.
Gnostic Lumbre, Morathi is older than the gods. Yes. And
depends on the version of the lore you go with.
Yeah, depends on how etheric bullshit works, but yes and no.
Yeah, and indeed, if we go with the version of lore from the end times, then the answer is no. Those gods came from a completely different version of reality, and they predate the Warhammer world by some significant measure. But if we go with other versions, the elven gods came about because of the elevation of the elves from what they were by the old ones. So the old ones and the elves and the gods are all component with each other. Morathi predates the arrival of the elven gods, saw them come, and then used that information throughout the course of her life.
And I will note the end times version is stupid and has never been reinforced by anything since.
The end time story is very stupid, but it is a version that's out there.
True. Matthew, I'm starting to think everyone's gaslighting Morathi thinks she isn't a god. You could argue that's very much the case. Which, so I don't have time to explain why this is so important, but Nagash isn't actually what he claims to be. Nagash isn't the god of death. He's a liar.
They're all liars to a degree.
They're all liars.
And in some respects, Morathi is the butt of all of their insecurities.
Yes.
And she is an easy target because she is unlike them. She's not the same as them. She is, if anything, far more powerful than probably any of them realized any non-divine entity could be, because she's already at the point where she can kick in god beasts and win. It's just not right. Getting rid of her is not a bad idea.
Jillian, thank you for the oh my gosh, thank you for the gift membership. Holy shit. Thank you guys. That's very, very, very kind. Vault Boy, I'm late catching up. I really hope this is the first of many AOS Lorebeards. You won't see them like crazy often, but maybe like once every other month-ish. Probably.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Depending on how popular this is.
Love it, and we get like tons of views and super chats and stuff, then fuck, we'll do it more often.
But we like to pander.
Yeah. Albin, is there any other example of a non-god entity beating a godlike entity in Morathi the only example? No, there's several in Age of Sigmar. Hers is the most notable because it's a one-on-one that she wins against a god beast, which is virtually unheard of. Everyone else that tangles with a god beast is got friends, or they have some kind of gimmick. She had neither. She didn't even have the Heart of Cain at this point. So yeah, it was kind of bonkers. Like, it was really in a good way. I don't mean it was stupid. I mean, it was like, it's a very good showing of how significant she is in the setting.
Yeah.
Nagash might be the closest thing, but his situation is different. Nagash cheats in an interesting way. Gnivel, I don't get why the models forced them to have the Kane lore. Couldn't they have just renamed them? They did that for other models in their lore. No, because they were banking on the recognition being part of why they sold.
Absolutely. Recognition is a core component. They were also at this point realizing that arguably the setup for Age of Sigmar that they had was lacking, and nostalgia, one of the biggest things that gets us to spend money, was missing. And by drawing upon the older material and drawing upon that nostalgia, they opened up a new aspect of Age of Sigmar, which was an aspect that was hard baked in, but they weren't utilizing much, i.e., this is Warhammer. So they baked in the nostalgia hard with the entirety of this.
The Daughters of Cain were one of the last books in first edition. And it was after the Rome Gate Wars was over.
At the end.
First half of first edition was very embarrassed about being related to Warhammer. The second half of first edition was like, oh wait, no, we love Warhammer. We love Warhammer.
Yeah. And then right at the end, they're like, Warhammer's fucking ace, and this is the proof of it. Look, see, everything you love about Warhammer is still here.
Yep. Stephen Lucas, story wrinkle. Her fellowship stat took a hit. Someone flash thing throws bones. Unusually, first daughter of Cain, too stubborn to switch cult. I don't even know what the fuck I'm reading, Stephen. There's too many emojis.
What I think they're saying, I'm sorry, Stephen, if I've got this wrong, is that with the whole issue with her being a giant snake thing, her fellowship stat takes a hit. She's not as good at persuading people. And when she found the witch elves and found them too stubborn to change, she just went along with it.
Sure. Firetide, thank you for becoming a member.
Reverse and Trapper?
Yeah,
okay, maybe not. I think I might have got that wrong.
Who's the strongest god beast? The strongest god beast is almost assuredly Dracothian. He's the strongest god beasts are the living constellations. So they are an actual constellation of stars that are alive, like that think, move, can attack you. Sotek and Dracothian are both living constellations. They are bonkers big. Like, they are horrifically huge creatures. But another Ignax was literally a living second sun that's in the form of like a big dragon creature, but it's like a solar entity. It's like a star. Like, some of the god beasts are obscene. Those are three. Also, Volcatrix, I think it's Volcatrix, the mother of salamanders. She was so big that her and Grimner kamikazed each other. So there have been some big boys. Could Facelaya become a god in AOS? Sure, why not? There's only one true god in AOS. Praise Boing Gob? I don't know who that is.
That's the presumably beast god of Squigs.
Hilarious. I love that. That could be. I haven't read the new Gloomspite Gets book. Anyway, so I can't tell if that's a joke or serious. Anyway, so back to AOS. So we arrive in the Age of Chaos. So the Age of Chaos is because Morathi left the Pantheon, it caused the first crack that then when the other elf gods went to go find Morathi and got so obsessed with focusing on their own elves and not worrying about what Sigmar and his guys were doing, caused more cracks. And Sigmar's pantheon falls apart eventually. Yeah. And when it falls apart, the dark gods who have discovered this realm, thanks a big part in yes, he's the squid god, yeah. The whole thing with luring Slaanesh here and all this stuff, the dark gods become aware of this reality, and they start whispering and doing all those little Cthulhu goddess things where they're like whispering in the minds of people, and it causes a series of chain reactions where a bunch of people do horrible things that unleash chaos into the world. It causes reality to like get thin enough that demons tear their way through, and the Age of Chaos begins. And it's basically the Cataclysm Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. Now, Morathi, very interestingly, is one of the very few groups, her people. We don't know the details of Malarian's folk because we don't even know them that well. The Umbraneth is they've been dubbed. But Morathi is the only faction we know of that is like normal flesh and blood people. The Sylvaneth don't count. Who didn't manifest a big chaos invasion. Mm-hmm. The Lumineth, which are the elves of Tyrion and Teclis, have a huge fucking civil war. that causes Slanesh shit all over Hysh. Humans have a bunch of problems. Greenskins have a bunch of problems. The Ideneth are just trying to survive. But the Daughters of Cain, despite their prevalence and large size, do not cause one of the incursions. However, there is a slight issue for Morathi, which is that because she has been taking extra souls, she just a little bit, she unbalances the delicate balance of Olgish, of the Hidden Gloaming, and its position between Olgu and Shish, and she drags it just a little bit too close to Olgu. And because of that, there is more. The followers of Slanesh can smell him in Olgu.
And one of them actually says Slanesh can. And Slanesh can sense the elven souls that are in Olgu, and then sends visions out to all of the Slanesh champions and says, "Hey, go there."
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's also that Slanesh literally doesn't know where it is.
Yeah, it has no idea at all. It doesn't even know it's captured from what I can gather from that story.
Yeah,
it's just like
worked out of its mind.
Happily being, Slanesh, feeling a bit fat, getting thinner, and then goes, "Wait a minute, I smell elven souls out there. What the fuck? There's definitely souls out there." And as it slowly drifts over, becomes more aware of it, and then sends visions out to the Slanesh champions to go invade Olgu.
Yeah, so a big invasion happens of Olgu. Olgu, for the Age of Chaos, is very proudly, and this is so it's called the Cathra Duel, which is the War of Shadows. This is the only place in all of Age of Sigmar, all of it, where the forces of order, quote unquote, do not lose. So the Age of Chaos lasts for 500 years. And in 500 years, there's a huge invasion of Slaneshi hordes. There's a big, Nurgle guy that shows up. Skaven, Clan Eshin, the clans Eshin, as they're called now, do a bunch of invasions. Morathi fights them all off. All of them. Using all of the secrets, using, driving her daughters to the absolute height of zealotrous battle. Azir also holds up, but Azir cheats by closing the gates. To be fair to Chaos, Azir kind of cheated. Olgu was under invasion the entire time, and they held out. They hold out until the Age of Sigmar. When the Age of Sigmar kicks off, because the realm of Chaos we can kind of just blip over. Because to be fair, it's only 500 years, quote unquote. But so when the Age of Sigmar kicks off, we don't see elves for a good bit of it. Basically, after the 500-year mess, there is a notable big battle where Morathi is kind of watching what's going on out in the realms, but is not revealing herself yet. As the Stormcast Eternals are coming down, they're fighting chaos back across all the realms, so they're fighting everywhere. And Sigmar, to his credit, does send a group, a pretty large group of Stormcast Eternals to go look for Morathi. Because Sigmar's like, we got to reestablish contact. She'll be on board. I know she will. We got to find her. Someone's got to find her. So he sends the Celestial Warbringers, which is one of the Stormcast hosts, to go track Morathi down. She finds them. And she reveals herself when she's interested in doing so, which is at the Battle of the Dolmen Heights.
Yeah.
Battle of the Dolmen Heights is a big fucking fight where the Celestial Vindicator, or nope, I said it wrong. The Celestial Warbringers, there we go. We're having a really bad time, and Morathi shows up and saves them. And says, "Hey, I'm ready to talk."
Yeah, it's good. This is a good period. I think the entire thing can be summed up with chaos comes, they go to war. Morathi and all of her descriptions in this period is marked as being one of the finest generals that the mortal realms has, and pretty much every single conflict she's involved with, she wins and then melts off back into the shadows again. It is a time, though, that she understands that at any moment the big loss could come, because the actual territory she holds is small, and it doesn't take much to lose that territory. So she knows she's on a precipice, but throughout the course of this entire war, she doesn't lose. And then eventually, as the Age of Sigmar is coming in, when they reaches out in turn and allies with Sigmar to help ensure that the next age can come about, and it'll be an age where she's on the same side as them. And in together in concert, they're in a position where they can win, which is great.
So, one of the things that happens in this this period that's notable is that when Morathi so the Realm Gate Wars are basically wrapping up, if not so like the whole saga of like Sigmar versus Khorne and Nurgle versus Alarielle gets reborn in her war aspect, Order starts fighting back, a lot of stuff is going okay-ish. As the war ends, there is a really, really big final fight between the Hedonites of Slaanesh and Morathi, with the help of her new allies, the Stormcast Eternals, wins. And this leads to the, oh gosh, I want to say, I can't remember if it's a 50-year time skip or 100. I think it's 100 years. We get a time skip from the end of first edition to the start of second edition, where it allows all the cities to get established.
Yeah, I'm going to just drop a quick point as to where we are. We're now at 6:30. And we have just kind of finished the Age of Myth in first edition.
I know.
I'm slightly concerned here. So there's a couple of things that I would like to say just before we start diving into the next parts. And the next parts are some of the most important parts for Morathi's story as a whole. We've just reached the point where she is still just a faction leader. That's all she is. She's not a goddess. She is not someone who is capable of moving and shifting the entire realms in a way that many would expect for Age of Sigmar. But she is, as you can see, having gone through the Age of Myth and into the Age of Sigmar, and now the expansion of Morathi's people out across, having allied with Sigmar, across the mortal realms. She's reaching the point now where she is one of the most significant powers in Age of Sigmar, regardless of whether she has god status or not. We're about to head into the next parts. I have a horrible feeling that we're just going to have to accept this is a two-parter.
Yeah, and that's fine if it is. That's fine if it is.
What do you think? I mean, I'm aware there's not that much that we can cover next. I mean, there's quite a bit, depending on how we tackle it. What do you think?
So I think that it is reasonable to say
Morathi's the worst at doing something in a single stream, isn't she?
There's just so much to talk about. I say this is going to be a two-parter, and I think I think what's going to happen is we're going to end this stream right before the Broken Realms.
That sounds perfect. Okay,
and then we'll start off next time with Broken Realms and everything that's happened since, which, to be fair, is a lot because she gets so much detail.
Yep.
Like Broken Realms is literally just like Morathi and Friends. Is like the easiest way to describe it. But after this Tuesday and after next Sunday, we're done. No more Morathi. She's done forever.
Bloody hell.
Until inevitably the Dark Elves return in the old world, then we got to go back. But
wow.
Anywho, so okay, that actually means I don't have to.
You don't need to. Yeah, that was my concern because I was thinking we're gonna have to speed up or just take our time. But yeah, I think that's wise.
Okay, so this is where we get to the end of first edition. So first edition ends, right? We're done. We're past first edition, and this is where someone on the writing team must have been in a dead sleep and woke up and went, "Morathi's Oracle. Oh God, Morathi's Oracle. I need to use Morathi for a thing."
Yeah, this is what I was referencing earlier when I said they just forgot about it. And they forgot about the core component of her character. And the closest that we had about this core component leading up to this point was she felt where Kane's heart was. And I was like, oh no, they're feeling it and it's the worship. And you know what? It actually makes sense in context. There's nothing miraculously or oracular here at all. And the reason why this is important is, again, go watch our Morathi streams about Warhammer Fantasy's version of her. Being an oracle is a core component of her character. Indeed, it is almost the core component because it informs everything else that she does. Right at the very beginning, before the cataclysm, she has her visions that chaos is coming, and nobody believes her. And she tries everything in her power to try and get people to think the way she does, and nobody accepts it. So she changes her character entirely. top to toe to be a character who is entirely self-sufficient and can hopefully persuade anyone to her way of thinking. And that change comes hand in hand with another core change, which is nailed in place with Anarian, her husband, which is, I will do whatever it takes to defeat chaos. I don't care what it means to the elves. I don't care what it means to Ulthuan. I don't care what it means to everyone else, as long as we win. And the only way she could see of herself truly winning was to keep on stacking on the power, keep on stacking on the abilities. It's a core component of her motivation. And up until second edition, none of that is really there. But things begin to twist as we move into the second edition of the game.
Yeah. So, this leads up to the end of the Rome Great Wars, and one of the authors suddenly remembers all this, and Morathi plays a key part in what is known as the Time of Tribulations. So at the end of first edition, they went, oh, what if we focused on telling good stories to get people excited about books? And they were like, oh, okay. And they released the Time of Omens. And the Time of Omens was basically that we got a ton of short stories. I'm talking 40 short stories about something is happening. All these different oracles and seers will start to go and everyone senses something strange is about to go down. But Morathi gets it first. And what she does is she walks into the halls of oh god, does she go to Hammer Hall? I
think it's Hammer Hall. Well, I can't remember. Names have become a blur to me in Age of Sigmar. Apologies, Age of Sigmar fans. I'm still dabbling.
Yeah,
I'm not going to remember this.
I'm looking up real fast. Yeah, it's always Hammer Hall. Yeah, so Hammer Hall, which TLDR, Hammer Hall is one of the biggest, most important cities in Age of Sigmar. It's the city of AOS because it stretches into two realms and it's a huge metropolis. So Morathi goes there and she addresses the Grand Conclave, which is the big ruling body. And she comes to them and she says, hey, so I'm here to warn you, Nagash is about to do something. Nagash is about to do something big. And it's so big, I'm going to be sending a great legion of my daughters into the realm of Shyish to go fight him. Because it's going to be that bad. And they go, and she sits there and basically, just using her words, convinces them that, oh shit, we need to set aside worrying about the Chaos Hordes further out in the Great Parch. We need to set aside worrying about the Magikid of Nurgle causing us problems in Gyran. Morathi's right. We need to listen to her. And they make a big old army. And on following her guidance and her instructions, they send great armies into Shyish to try and stop Nagash. And the Time of Tribulations follows, it's several years, but it follows that you have all these different oracles and people having all these visions. The dark gods each get these very, very cool moments where the gods themselves are reacting and sending visions and ideas to their various prophets and stuff to say, go fight Nagash, go fight Nagash. And it builds up to, there is a great war that centers around Nagashazar, where it's basically every other faction is hustling towards Nagashazar to try and lay siege to it and break it, because Nagash is preparing the Great Ritual Part 2 because Nagash can't come up with original names.
Oh man.
And all the armies of death are trying to slow down the people that are fighting their way in.
Yeah, so there is something that I think is worth saying here, because it's very much a non-Age of Sigmar point to make, but it's definitely a point that when you reach this, if you're reading it, you go, oh, this is the big change. And it's the big change that started at the end of Age of Sigmar First Edition, where they went, you know what, those nostalgia buttons, why aren't we pressing them? Why are we not getting all the Warhammer fans to go, oh, Age of Sigmar's Warhammer. Oh, I get you now. So what happens? They bring back a faction or two, but also at the same time adding an entirely new one, the Identitiken, added right at the end of first edition of Age of Sigmar. And the cool as fuck, an entire new section of elves, big watery elves, fucking awesome. And really nice miniatures too. And the whole concept of Mathland being wrapped into that, so the old fans had something to run off of and go, oh, that's in there too. And then they come into second edition and they go, yeah, you know Nagash, don't you? We all know Nagash. And what does Nagash do? He does great big fuck off rituals that make everybody really scared. And that's how they kick it all off in this edition. And it's obviously a gigantic gong being rung out to all those older fans of Warhammer who've given up. People like me, okay, who have no interest in what Age of Sigmar has become, because they've looked at Age of Sigmar and they've gone, this is not only entirely alien to everything that I liked about Warhammer, and the game isn't that great, but it's also taking things I like about Warhammer and screwing it up in a way that I just don't like. And they've sat down and they've gone, how can we take all the things that we've already done? We've done that. We're not going to distance ourselves from it. We'll accept it. But then weave it into what Warhammer is to everybody else. And they start very carefully pulling out that reaction hammer for your knee and tapping it on the knee to see who will kick. And slowly but surely, Warhammer fans started kicking because the rules for Age of Sigmar got tidied up and they started pulling upon all the things that Warhammer fans kind of loved. And if you love the stories of Nagash et al., it's in second edition that they start to ring. And they don't sound different. They don't sound like weird versions of Warhammer. They sound like Warhammer tales being told in a slightly different environment. And it feels like Warhammer Fantasy again. But we also have the Space Marine equivalent that they wanted to have in there, sitting side by side with the Dark Elves that we all know and love. It kind of changes things. And immediately it makes the game just that touch more approachable to all of the older fan base that had been distanced by the new game, whilst the newer fan base that's coming in for the first time, they just get access to the first time to all of these stories. Because at this point as well, it's worth noting one other key fact. Total War is at this point getting huge.
Yes.
Really quite big. Total War Warhammer is landing in a way that no one expected. And that means that a whole new group of Warhammer fans who were fans of the old version of Warhammer are spreading. And it's not a small number. We're not talking about 10,000 new fans who happen to have picked up a PDF. We're talking about 100,000, way more fans of a game getting played daily, seeing characters and factions that they love and not having any game espoused by Games Workshop that provides them with an outlet for it. So Games Workshop goes, well, now we do. Age of Sigmar is changing to be more reflective of Warhammer as a whole. Now, depending upon how conscious a decision you think that was, I personally think it was very conscious, but I haven't spoken to anyone involved with it. I might be wrong, but depending upon how conscious a decision you think that is, would also depend upon how much you think this would appeal to you as a player if you happen to be one of those that have moved away from Age of Sigmar thinking it's not Warhammer and think, well, maybe it might have something for me, because it's from about this point onwards that it starts appealing to Warhammer fans in general, not just Age of Sigmar fans.
Yeah, and I will say that this also was when Age of Sigmar very much found its footing. In that even in and of itself as a setting, this is when Age of Sigmar finally was able to plant its feet and say, oh, you know what? These are the kinds of... Because I remember this moment so distinctly, because as a fan of Warhammer, I did not like AOS. I hated AOS. I hated it. Yeah. And this moment, the time of tribulations, also known as Malign Portents, was when I got into Age of Sigmar and I started going, oh, and it was the short stories. Reading a short story of Morathi addressing the conclave of Hammerhall and getting to see her written in a perspective where I was like, oh, this kind of feels fun. Or a short story.
It feels like Morathi.
Yeah. Or a short story about like these people living in a village who had been kind of sick and they were recovering from a completely mundane illness and they're being attacked by something. And you're like, oh, this is like some kind of new chaos monster or whatever. And it's revealed that it's a Stormcast Eternal who has been reforged so many times that he can't tell the difference between a normal person that's sick and someone that's corrupted by Nurgle. and he brutally murders them.
Complex,
and I'm
like that. Shades of grey.
Damn, all right. Like the stories start getting muddier and grimmer, and it started feeling like this isn't Warhammer Fantasy, but I see the roots, and I'm seeing the love for what they are what they are a descendant of shining through, which to me made all the difference in the world.
So on my side, I started picking up Age of Sigmar's lore at about this time with more interest. Now, I've been buying bits and pieces of it along the way, but I haven't been paying that much attention to it. But by 2019, which is a year approximately into second edition, I was working full-time on the role-playing game, and I was summoned down to Games Workshop to discuss what we were doing with the first release in 2019. And I remember sitting in that room and being shown the new Age of Sigmar models that they were just about to release. So they wouldn't be released for a wee while yet. And they brought out the new Slaanesh models, and they brought out all the models from, I suddenly forget the name, Curse City, is that the name of the game?
Yes.
They brought out the Curse City models, and they brought all those out. And I looked at them and went, okay, look at that Slaanesh Greater Demon. Holy shit, I'm so converted. I want that. That's amazing. That's really amazing model. And I'm looking at all the new ones, and they're bringing out the new Gloomspite Gets, and there's a whole bunch of really cool Trollocs in there. And I was like, oh, look at that paint job. And I was getting really excited in a way that I only ever got excited when I saw new Warhammer models. And I was like, oh, and it suddenly clicked in my head. And I went, oh no. I think I might want to be involved with the Age of Sigmar roleplay game. Oh, God damn it. This is bad. This is bad news. But it was the first time that Age of Sigmar properly clicked with me, because they were reaching the point now where they were drawing upon Warhammer stuff and being a little bitty more open to not just using it, but broadly applying it to their Age of Sigmar setting, and it made it feel more familiar. And it's from, again, if you're out there thinking, is there anything I want to look at? It's from about this era, 2019-20 onwards, that you get what I feel are some of the strongest developments for Age of Sigmar. And yes, they are still being motivated strongly by miniature first, story second. But the stories that they're building into this, some of them are genuinely great. And many of them, as you make your way through the short stories, for example, or you make your way through to the big Necroquake, what a stupid name, but the big event as it's about to occur, and everything involved with it. Some of the stories around this are not just genuinely good, but they also feel Warhammer. And it is, I think, the first time when Age of Sigmar starts to click. And everyone's got their own thing that pulls them in. For me, it was literally seeing the Greater Demon of Slaanesh in front of me that made me go, I'm going to have to read a little bit more. But after that, when Soulbound, which wasn't called Soulbound at that point, which is the role-playing game for Age of Sigmar, when it was getting built, I actively became a part of the conversation. I was speaking to Emmett, who was the chap who was in command of the production for that, quite a bit. I remember having a big, long conversation with him at Essen, for example, about things he was doing, things I might suggest doing as well. And it was a conversation that was no longer an uninformed one from my side, because I'd went and read the books beforehand because I got suddenly interested. So I think all of that is worth making clear, spending a bit of time with, because we now have a bit of time. Do you understand that there is stuff to convert with? Pardon me, there is stuff that might convert you in this area if you're someone that loves Warhammer and is unsure if Age of Sigmar could ever convert you. This is the era where it starts to offer little dangling hooks with bait on, and one of them might get you if you bite.
So we have one cute, actually very fun little stop to make with Morathi before we end out first edition, and we'll start next time with second edition, which is that there is one other story that goes down.
Morathi.
Yeah. Fucking Morathi, dude. So actually two little things. So the first is Morathi does one other prophetic thing, or oracle thing, if you wish, which is that after Morathi warns the court of Hammerhall, the Grand Conclave, about what's going on with the Gash, and she is literally the reason the forces of order figure out where the tribulations are coming from, what all the stuff is. She's the only reason they really figure that out, and they'll start moving against Nagash. Unfortunately, they don't make it in time, but luckily some other things disrupt him, which we'll get into later. But Morathi does one other thing here, which is that she has now, because she has reestablished contact with the Pantheon, she goes and talks to the other elven gods for the first time in centuries, excluding her son. But because she's actually been keeping up relatively up in
in the same realm.
In the same realm. They don't talk often, but they talk often enough. And Morathi goes to them and she says, hey, something I need y'all to understand is that sooner or later, Slaanesh is going to break free. It's going to happen. And Morathi knows this for two reasons, which is one, she has a vision, and two, she knows that she actually realizes before anyone else does that her little stunt of taking the extra souls has ever so slightly unbalanced Slaanesh's prison. And keeping that thing balanced is key. And instead of being like trying to find a way to really like look into fixing it, she goes, no, no, this is kind of fucked. And Tyrion and Malarian both refuse to believe her. They both go, nope, that's impossible. You're bullshit. You're just trying to get something out of me. I refuse. Teclis, which actually ties in well to what we talked about with Teclis earlier of having the idea to go to her in the first place. Teclis goes, okay, can you tell me more? And they have a very quiet discussion, which leads to the return of the Lumineth Realm Lords, of Teclis taking action. Morathi is what spurs him into becoming more widely involved. And then the last big thing that we have with Morathi doesn't actually involve, this one's actually kind of interesting because where it takes place is very nebulous. But there is an incident that happens in this general ballpark of the timeline where some Caradron overlords, which are the dwarfs, dwarf faction, or called Dwarden AOS because it's more copyrightable term, are basically like if you took the concept of gyrocopters and gyrobombers and you made an entire faction based off of that.
Yep.
So they're sky dwarfs with very steampunk vibes. They steal
some cool minis.
Yeah, very cool minis.
Yeah.
They steal something from one of Morathi's cities, some kind of resource that we still haven't gotten to see what exactly this leads to yet, but they steal something of 5 value that leads to them getting attacked by a bunch of Daughters of Cain and some dragon riders of the Order Serpentis. And while they're getting attacked, it is such a big attack that Morathi herself makes an appearance. And Morathi attacks this vessel, which was a complete shock when I was reading this White Dwarf story, by the way. I remember being like, holy fuck, Morathi's here. And she is literally unstoppable. Like it is basically like throwing a piranha into a bowl of tadpoles. It's a bad time for the Dwarden. But one of the Dwarden there, and this is not a super important little story note, it's just kind of a fun little interesting one. It ends up being that Grombrindal is there. And Grombrindal gets into a big ol' fucking fight with Morathi. And Grombrindal, despite the fact that at this point it's revealed later in his own little book, at this point he is divine. He has been reforged and imbued with the god might of Grugni, the god of metal, who is back. And Grombrindal is literally put back together. This is the same story, Whitebeard. His memories are very jumbled.
So again, just to make sure, if you're not sure who that is, it's the archetypical white dwarf, the mystical dwarf figure that appears from any old place when dwarves are in trouble and saves their ass. And we've got an entire stream about Grombrindal kicking around already. Go find it if you want to know more.
Yeah, so her and Grombrindal have a big old fight, and once again, to Morathi's credit, she's fighting him. This is a melee fight. It's not like she's like blasting with spells and stuff. She's genuinely fighting him with her claws and her spear and everything. Grombrindal holds her off, and that is all he is able to do.
Yeah.
He cannot wound her. He's not able to like scare her off. Grombrindal is able to hold her at bay. And to once again be transparent about how powerful Morathi is. This is the exact same Grombrindal who later in the story will like be dealing with and fighting very powerful characters and like splatting their asses. When him and Morathi talk, he throws some cute insults her way, But Morathi does.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, they're very cute little goofy insults. But Morathi
They're
eventually recognizes him because he looks. Grumbrindle in Age of Sigmar he's a shapeshifter. He like appears as whatever Dwarden are most likely to feel comfortable with. So in the case of this book, he appears as a Caradron. And it's only when he's fighting Morathi that he's kind of forced to reveal his true self.
Because I'm worth it. Out flips the white hair.
Exactly. And Morathi is one of the very few figures who actually figures out that he's back. That Grumbrindle has returned from the world that was. But the thing that kills me is how much this is Morathi when she's merely a demigod. So she's not a god yet. This is before her ascension. And she's able to fucking hold off Grumbrindle, which is huge in a melee fight.
Yeah, I think it's an important aspect of understanding the character up to this point. Morathi up to this point may not be a god as it's defined by the rather nebulous terms inside Age of Sigmar, as in is not a representative of one of the realms, is not some sort of beast god, is not a god, not a chaos god, not any of those things. She's just this exceedingly powerful and almost immortal woman. She's not immortal. That's an important component of the god aspects that they more than once drop in the various points. She's an elf. But as an elf, she is of such extraordinary power at this point that she can go toe-to-toe with and defeat gods. So whatever they decide to turn her into as we progress into the next video and we move towards her ascension towards godhood, it's several orders bigger than what this entity is. This entity that can hold off against the White Dwarf. This entity that without the good old Heart of Cain can hold off one of the beast gods. She is already extraordinary. There's a reason why Malarian needed her help, and eventually Sigmar as well, their help to build what eventually they build for the capital city over in the realm of Ulgu. She is of equal capability, if not necessarily divine. The capability, if we were just to lay them out as a bunch of stats on a game sheet, she is their equal. And sometimes she'll win, and sometimes she won't, but she is the equal of the gods. And what she's about to move to is going to take her into an entirely new, potentially stratospheric realm.
Yep. All right, let's get super chats.
Then have a quick conclusion.
Excellent. They captured Slaanesh in a food coma. They did. They absolutely did.
And I'll also say that this is one of the odder moments in lore in general, because why?
Well, okay,
why?
So the interesting thing about this is that it was written originally for a different reason, which is that if you read first edition, it is grotesquely obvious that Slaanesh was going to be written out of the setting.
Oh, yeah. Grotesquely. Clearly they were uncomfortable with much of what Slaanesh offered, so they just bound it up and hid it in a corner, which was silly because it was always going to be there in 40k anyway. So you're as well to figure out how to use it rather than not. And they did that. It makes no sense. The more you look at it, the more it makes no sense of Slaanesh. Why is Slaanesh a being that doesn't really understand time anyway, that lives outside of time and space, just sitting there bloated for uncounted millennia? Just what? It doesn't make sense. This is just a few elven souls. If we go to the 40k version, it took an entire Eldari empire within it and was happily dancing across the heavens, eating more gods after that. Somehow the Age of Sigmar version of Slaanesh is shit. Really, really shit. No other way to put it. Just bad. And the story, when you look at it, the more you think about it, the more you go, that's just a bit weird. But obviously, again, it was driven by corporate needs or business needs or assumed business needs rather than good story reasons. And they tried to build a good story out of it, but the story they built, when you look at it, creaks at the seams and doesn't make a great deal of sense.
Yeah, what they really needed to do with Slaanesh, in my opinion, is they really should have delved into, because with Archaon, they do this whole thing of like trying to make Archaon like feel like he's an appropriate big bad for Age of Sigmar. So they say, he goes on and destroys like a bunch more realities before he comes to this one.
Dead!
And they really needed to do the same thing with Slaanesh, where they should have said like Slaanesh has gone on to devour like countless realities, and that's why it's so bloated.
I've got an indigestion because I've got a few elves, so I'm just going to keep here. What are these elves?
Like, so.
Or if you're going to do that, then you have to make the elves really super special.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a reason that he's got his indigestion.
Yeah, like that elf blockage, you know, it's that classic of the other gods told Smash, you know you're elf intolerant. Stop eating them. Stop it.
Funny, look at the fine crepes.
I know. Every Morathi stream should be a subathon.
I wouldn't argue.
Yeah, we wouldn't argue with that. Let's even look at try say woes of stranger action was a conspiracy.
Oh, I feel like I'm missing the thing that brought up that conversation in the first place, Stephen. Sorry for not quite getting that. If someone can explain it in the chat before we go.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. I don't. Ricky Chapman, Old World Survivors and AOS could be fun. I mean, that's literally what Gotrek is. That's the whole point of the Gotrek story is angry man from Old World yells at AOS is literally just the Gotrek story in a nutshell.
It's kind of funny.
Necroplayer, mine was the inclusion of the return of Sigvald, also recently with the Hellsmiths of Hashut. Yeah.
The Hellsmiths are pretty awesome. Yeah.
Age of Sigmar has really become that thing where I feel like the vast majority of people, if I were to sit down with someone for like 2 hours and just talk to them about what they love about fantasy and stuff, I could probably find a short story or a book or something that I could give them where they would go, oh, this is pretty fucking cool. Like, not that they would pick up the game, but at least find something in the setting that they go, I enjoyed this. But it's definitely, it takes time. And you have to like be aware
in a way
of
that Warhammer doesn't.
No, Warhammer's so much easier.
So much easier.
Has Morathi talked with the new Dwarden ancestor gods? No. Not that we've seen. She almost certainly. Wait, no, yes, she has. Yes, she has. She talks to Grugni. We're not there yet, but she does talk to Grugni.
Stream number 2, we'll cover it.
Yeah, stream number 2. What's my favorite part of the new Morathi lore? We're not there yet. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, actually, my favorite part is the genesis of it all, when she crawls herself out of Slaanesh, pulls herself out. It's not my favorite part. It's not my favorite part because of how they described it. I'll hit that when I do a very quick conclusion, but it's my favorite part for what it potentially represents.
That's cool. Did Malarian and Grumberdal meet yet? No.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, which I'm a little shocked they hadn't when they were
doing. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah, when they were doing the saga or the Chronicles of the Wanderer, because the whole point of that is Grumberdal just like showing up places and interacting with people.
It's an obvious place.
Yeah, it's weird. We see him interact with Morathi, fun, but like, why not Malarian then? And we also we see him interact with Tzeentch, like not just a demon of Tzeentch, like the Tzeentch has like a fucking thing with him. Well, technically with Grugni, but it's through Grumberdal's perspective. We see Tyrion talk to Grugni, and we see Nagash talk to Grugni. Did they meet? Maybe they did. I'd have to double check it.
Then I definitely missed it. As I said right at the very beginning, there's a lot of Age of Sigmar I've not just missed. I just don't know yet. But yeah, I will slowly but surely plug those gaps.
It could be. I was looking at the other room. There is a new Grumberdal book out that I have right here, which is Ancestor's Burden. I don't know if it's maybe in this book. I haven't had a chance to read through this book yet. So maybe it's in there. Or it might have been in Saga Wanderers of the Chronicles. It just slipped my mind because that book it's like 6 short stories plus an additional short story.
Cool. Alrighty, are we at time for a quick conclusion?
Yeah, I think it's conclusion time.
Yeah, okay, so this isn't the conclusion I expected to give, like by any stretch, because I expected us to be done. So,
yeah, wouldn't that be nice on Lorebeards?
Yeah, it would, but I think in some respects it leads to a stronger conclusion, and that is that Age of Sigmar has offered a lot in its time. And for those of you that aren't sure about Age of Sigmar lore, hopefully this shows that even though we've not yet reached what we consider to be some of the better parts of the lore, we've already covered a lot, and in that lot we've covered some pretty awesome shit. Age of Sigmar presents a lot of cool. Now, so far, has anything happened or been said that convinces me, as a non-Age of Sigmar fan, that I must now be one? And the answer is, so far, no. I am interested. I'm amused. I'm intrigued by some of the choices they've made, but I'm not drawn in. And one of the primary reasons for that is, as we reach this point, and as I was reading my way through this point, one aspect of Morathi's character began to ring through, and that is her core motivation. What is it? Now, you might go, she's looking for power. No, that was not her core motivation. Her core motivation was to stop the Chaos Gods before, to stop the end of the world, basically. And we're going to sum it up in its simplest form. And that turned into her presenting as someone who wanted all those things, but did other things even when it made her power weaker. Because getting power wasn't all she was about. But at this point, her core motivation appears to be only, I want more power. My son has more power than me. I want to have the same power as him. This isn't fair. Stomp, stomp, stomp of my feet. And whilst there's a complexity behind it all, there doesn't appear to be that much more for her. And in some respects, at this point, I was getting worried. And the worry that I had was that Age of Sigmar, as far as I could see as I was reading through the books up to this point, was all about big, awesome moments and big, awesome miniatures, but cared absolutely nothing for the characters themselves. Now, was this fair? Absolutely not. Many writers clearly loved the characters they were playing with. But when I looked at the bigger beats, particularly those that were coming from the various publications outside of the novels, it felt like everything was being made by committee. And whilst that committee might be small, the committee appeared to be taking secondary place to what's the most likely to be a big event for people to be excited by, the next new miniature that everyone's going to want to purchase, whatever's going to make corporate people really happy because we've sold so many, and much less about what was really fucking cool about this particular setting. And at this point, as we're moving from first to second edition, it was beginning to change, but it hadn't quite hit yet. Now, is it going to hit is the big one for me as we move into the next part. Am I going to go, you know what, it's taken me along for a ride, and it's not a lot of big explosions, but really shallow story. Talking the Michael Bay of miniature battle games. It's so cool, so much explosion, so great, but the actual story and character is secondary to the, I don't know, pair that are making their way across the road with a giant piece of glass just so that the person in the car can try to swerve around it. Why are they there with the glass? They're only there for the person going down the hill in a car to swerve around. There's no story involved. Doesn't matter. And Age of Sigmar, in some respects, was one gigantic piece of glass getting moved around to create huge explosions and make people like me either be interested or hopefully be interested. But the second you look deeper, there's just nothing there. There's no reason for the glass to be there or for them to be going down that particular hill. It's all about action and explosions. And at this point, I felt like it was all actions and explosions, and I was worried. And Morathi is the perfect character to examine this, because back in Warhammer, she had been massively mistreated and woefully misunderstood when you look at the full character. And we saw that when we examined it in Morathi Stream 1 and 2 for Warhammer Fantasy. And as we move now into Lorebeards Age of Sigmar, we're trying to see whether they take that character and do something great with it. And at that heart of that is, what is her motivation? What is she trying to do, and why? So at the core of the next stream, to end my conclusion, I have a question. By the end of next stream, will we go, I know who Morathi is, and holy shit? Or are we going to go, she's just there to be misandrist, to make big explosions, to move the plot along, and to turn it into a giant Age of Sigmar soap opera without any depth of character? And we'll be answering that next time.
Ooh. Yeah. And I am 99.9999% sure the Malarian tidbit is in the Chronicles of the Wanderer. I just don't remember what part, because it's like a 6-part thing. But yeah, though
I certainly don't know.
Yeah, I have to go back and reread it, which I'll try to do for next stream, because I can't remember if it's Grombrindal that met him or Grugni that met him, because the book, the saga of the Chronicles of the Wanderer, deliberately misleads you of thinking it's all Grombrindal, but some of it is Grugni and some of it is Grombrindal, and they're having different experiences. Because like we see like Grugni talk to Zinch, and we also see, I think it's Grugni that talks to Tyrion. I think.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure
I
about
only
that
read
one.
the Morathi and Grombrindle bit, and that was it.
Yeah,
So I
anyway,
don't know what any of the rest is.
I got to reread that anyway because I want to read through the new book too. So anyway,
Cool.
thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you had fun. We had a good number of y'all tuned in. I think it's the highest viewers we had in a hot minute, which is we really appreciate.
Yeah,
thank you for all thank you all for the support and everything. Real quick, last one here. If there's any elf that have an escape plan of eaten by Slanesh, it'd be Morathi. Very true. Our daughter
I agree completely.
Our Daughters of King models too narrow in style like Fire Slayers. Not anymore. They were initially, but it's a full-fledged range now.
Yeah, I agree. I think to begin with, they were a bit tight and they needed a broader range, but now it feels like a proper army.
Yeah, Fire Slayers still feel a little too narrow. But Slayers that's a tight niche. Like they took a single unit and tried to make a faction out of it. Which is hard.
If we ever reach that point, you are going to find one hell of a whiny stream from me.
Oh, I would. There are a few things that I desperately love about the Fire Slayers, but I fucking hate everything else about them, which is a lot. There's some teeny tiny bits that I really like, but anyway.
Cool. Right, thanks all. That was marvelous. We will see you up. It might be the 500th.
Okay, if you're talking about this, you're not gonna like this. I don't think this counts. If you're talking about what I think you're talking about. Oh, I know what you're talking about now. So yes, the White Dwarf magazines have segments where the viewers can ask Grombrindle questions.
Is that what that is?
Yes, and there's a part where Grombrindle does a segment, and it's not part of the viewer ask, but I don't remember which. I think it's the White 500th, but there is a White Dwarf magazine where Grombrindle is the narrator, and he chats a bit about all of the gods, and he gives like a little bit of like, oh, hee hee ha ha. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that counts. It's not like it's not an army book or like a Black Library book. I'll put it this way. It's not something that if Games Workshop are going to be expanding, or like when Malarian comes out, the writers of that are not going to go back to that White Dwarf article and be like, oh, what did we say Grombrindle said about Malarian where he said he's kind of chill now? Like White Dwarf magazines, they're cute. I love them. As far as I'm concerned, for the core setting, they don't exist.
Cool.
Because they pump those out every month and they just fill them with random shit. I'm so sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear. Like the back lore parts, like the short stories at the end, those will often get collated and re-released as Black Library books. Those are fine. I have no problem with those. But like the cutesy little like, oh, what are we going to talk about this month part? Where it's like, let's flesh out this place in the background. In my experience, they release that information and then it never comes back. It never comes back.
Yeah, it sits in the White Dwarf and is never seen again unless somebody in the roleplay game picks it up and turns it into something new. That's often the case.
Yeah, it's not always like that. Sometimes, they'll use it as like, oh, like here's a thing coming out soon. But
it's 516 apparently.
Yeah, 516. The God section, I'm not confident they're going to do anything with that. And if they're not going to do anything with it, it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. I want to see Malarian and Grombrindle talk to each other. That has not happened. All right, anyway.
I couldn't tell you one way or the other.
Sorry.
So on that bombshell and slight rant, we say thank you all for tuning into the first episode of Lorebeards Age of Sigmar, which will be hopefully the first of several. We're going to do another one on Morathi because apparently we are the worst at concluding any stream. But I do think this one is worth it because it's one that, as we move into the second part, for those of you who are interested in Warhammer lore and how it mixes in with Age of Sigmar lore, you're going to get a good example, not just of how they meet and turn into something new, but also what Age of Sigmar is and what it does with its characters, because Morathi, in some respects, is the only character where we get a super clean version of what does it take to go from Warhammer to Age of Sigmar to godhood. And it's a really nice step process for you to take a look at it and say, so that's what's happening with the others, to which we'll say, no, it's not at all what's happening with the others, but it's a really good routine.
The last thing I'll say is that if you enjoyed this, please consider leaving a comment below this one about like, I want more of this, yada, yada. Because like we kind of like look for engagement and stuff to figure out what works and what doesn't. And if it's like people aren't really vibing with the AOS stuff, then we're probably not going to bother with it as much. If people love it, then we're going to do more of it.
Yep, true fact on both fronts. Okay, so beyond that, we shall see you all next time.
Bye-bye. Goodbye.